Welcome back to Grimoire Audiobooks. Today, we embark on the thrilling conclusion of Harry Potter and the Poisoned Pen by the talented GenkaiFan. In this intriguing tale, the world of Hogwarts is shaken by a mysterious force that challenges loyalty, courage, and trust. As secrets come to light and relationships are tested, the story builds to a climax that is as gripping as it is satisfying. In Harry Potter and the Poisoned Pen, a shadowy adversary emerges, threatening to disrupt the fragile peace of the wizarding world. This fanfiction masterfully combines suspense, drama, and wit, delivering a fresh take on our beloved characters and their adventures. GenkaiFan is celebrated for their exceptional ability to craft compelling mysteries within the Harry Potter universe. With a sharp eye for character development and narrative tension, their stories captivate and intrigue in equal measure. Disclaimer: this fanfiction is a transformative work based on J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter series. All original characters, settings, and trademarks belong to their respective owners. This reading is created purely for entertainment purposes, with no copyright infringement intended. So, sit back, relax, and prepare for the grand finale with Harry Potter and the Poisoned Pen by GenkaiFan at Grimoire Audiobooks. Don't forget, the next adventure awaits if we gather 50 likes and 50 comments. Your support keeps the magic alive. Let's dive into the final chapters of this thrilling story. Harry Potter and the Poisoned Pen by GenkaiFan. 17. Are these tests really necessary? It was now the middle of November, and the Christmas halls were fast approaching. With Umbridge out of the way, and the aura that Madame Bones provided in her place, the data lessons were quite exciting. Harry and his friends were learning a lot. Harry was adjusting to the schedule he and Lord Peter had worked out. He didn't have free time anymore. Between the remedial potions twice a week, studying with Hermione and Ron whenever she could nag him into it, plus Quidditch practice, Harry wasn't sure how he managed the meetings with the goblins and Lord Peter once a week and Healer Atwater's twice a week. Thank Merlin for Dobby. Harry's estate management meetings with the goblins were thankfully only 2 hours long. They were currently going over his portfolios in both the Muggle and Wizarding worlds, keeping up with market trends. Lord Peter sat in on these meetings to briefly detail his progress of Lord Harry's Emancipation suit against the Ministry. Lord Peter also reported the audit for Gringotts was almost finished. They were still compiling the data. At least so far they'd managed to keep Dumbledore, the old meddler, out of the loop. With the Christmas holidays fast approaching, it wouldn't be that way for long. As soon as Lord Peter filed, everything would go arse over teacup. The meetings with Healer Atwater varied in duration. He was busy healing the damage done to Harry's body over the years. Plus, he had to undo the damage that the remedial potions were causing without leaving signs that Harry was being helped. The exercises and books that Healer Atwaters gave him helped Harry to understand just what Snape was doing and the damage he was causing. "Sirs?" Harry asked one night. "Yes, Harrys? Why is it that Snape hasn't found any memories about me being Oliver Twist? It is one of the reasons I dread seeing him. I keep thinking he'll find out." Healer Atwaters had no love for the potions master. He had no problem with Harry's lack of respect for Severus Snape. Therefore, he made no attempt to correct the disrespect or to force Harry to add the title of Professor in front of the man's name. It was patently obvious to him that the man couldn't teach, and therefore held no claim to the title. "Well, Harry," the healer said, waving him over to a chair. "I have a theory about that. Have a seat while I explain." Once they were comfortable, the healer started. "I was concerned about it at first when your barrister, Lord Peter, came to me. However, I have noticed an odd quirk in your mind that I couldn't explain away until he mentioned your secret." Harry frowned, but said nothing. "The fact is, Harry, that you have developed the ability to lock away certain parts of your thoughts and memories that you don't want to share or that bring you pain. I believe this is an innate part of your mind, and it was created when you were a child. It is where you push everything you don't want to deal with. A form of natural occlumency often seen in abused children." Harry frowned as he thought about what Healer Atwater said. Do you mean when Snape does what he does, he's actually tearing down my defenses? Is that why it hurts so much? Exactly. Here the healer was a bit uncomfortable. I am spending most of our sessions repairing the damage and helping you shore up your defenses. Harry straightened a bit. So basically he's tearing down, and you're rebuilding. What happens if he manages to break it down completely? What would happen, Harry, is that you would develop two very distinct personalities. Right now, they are still connected. Should that connection be severed, you will have two separate personalities. One, shall we say the child, who first felt the need to hide is your Slytherin side. The other, for want of a better term, would be the side everyone expects to see in you. You are the boy who lived. Dumbledore's golden boy. Harry listened thoughtfully as the healer continued. With the need to protect yourself as a child, you developed your Slytherin side very early in your life. You had to hide all of your natural abilities so that you would not be punished. This included your intelligence and your magic. When you finally re-emerged back into the wizarding world, everyone expected a confident, heroic young wizard, and your mind adjusted to fit that role. Well, the Sorting Hat did say that I would do well in either Gryffindor or Slytherin, and I chose Gryffindor, Harry mused, with a slight frown. Remarkable. I didn't think anyone could influence that ancient scrap of fabric, Healer Atwaters remarked. But getting back to what I was saying, keeping your intelligence hidden left you no outlet for the frustrations caused in your dealings with the wizarding world. Therefore, your Slytherin side created Oliver Twist and hid him safely away. We must be careful not to allow these two sides of your personality to split completely. So, how is it that Snape hasn't caught on? Harry asked, directing the subject back to the problem at hand. When you are standing in front of him, what side are you showing him? Your Slytherin side or your Gryffindor side? Harry shrugged. My Gryffindor side, I guess. It's what he expects of me. Aha. Exactly. Healer Atwaters exclaimed. So while you are standing in front of him, your Slytherin side, the one that has always protected you, grabs all those memories you don't want him to see and hides them. It is also sometimes called survival instinct. Severus Snape isn't to be trusted, so it hides those memories you don't want him to see. But he still sees plenty of my past, Harry protested. Yes, he does, but then he only sees fragments of your memories and not whole sets, he explained. Again, it goes back to survival. He would get very suspicious if he found nothing. Now wouldn't he? Harry nodded and thought over all of his sessions and the bits of memory that Snape saw. But how? Again, your Slytherin side decides what the man sees or doesn't see. You are a natural Clemens, and what that man is doing is tearing down your shields. Your natural instinct for self-preservation shunts him over to memories on your Gryffindor side. I believe he is doing it either on Dumbledore's order or Riddle's. One thing Harry liked about this healer was he wasn't a sheep like the rest of the wizarding world. He refused to say, he who must not be named, or you know who, although he did say names have power. So he refused to say Lord Voldemort, or the Dark Lord. For him it's Tom or Riddle. Harry scowled. Could Snape be doing this because he hates my father? He's always comparing me to him, Harry asked. Don't worry, Harry. Your mind shields are working very well, he reassured. Which brings me to another point. Your curse scar. I would like to try something, if it's all right with you. Harry raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Hermione sighed. She couldn't find Harry again, and he was late for their study session. Harry, she exclaimed, when she finally caught up with him in the library. We need to study for our OWLS. Where have you been? The teen sighed as he looked up from a homework essay he was working on. I've been here since dinner, Hermione. Where did you think I would be? She huffed angrily as she sat in a chair across from him. These exams are important, Harry. Harry closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. I know, Hermione. I know. Look, let me finish this potions essay, then I'll go back to the common room with you. All right, Harry, she replied with a long-suffering sigh. All eyes looked at Hermione Granger as she screamed out a denial a couple mornings later. It was the day that Twist's article came out. Many purebloods, including Draco Malfoy, snickered while reading the article. Many of the half-blood and Muggleborns shook their heads in disbelief. Hey, Granger, Draco Malfoy sniped from the Slytherin table. Better study hard. If your grades are good enough, I might just hire you as my secretary. The Slytherins burst into laughter as Hermione Granger stormed out. Neville Longbottom started to read aloud what had gotten Hermione so upset. Are these tests really necessary? With the Christmas hauls coming up, everyone's thoughts are turned to going home, holiday shopping, seeing family, and enjoying the holiday season. Except for a select few, that is. It is noted by many that Ravenclaws are research obsessive, along with one Gryffindor. OWL and Newt's exams are less than 6 months away. Time to get out the day planners and work up a study guide. But for most students, there is plenty of time to study. Why worry when Christmas is almost upon us? Right? After watching Hermione Granger manhandle the boy, who lived into studying for their OWLs several times this week, it begs the question, why are these exams so important? Well, the answer should be to get better jobs, a career you want, or to get accepted as an apprentice. However, are they? Let's look at the statistics. Outstanding Wizarding levels, or more affectionately called OWLs, are the first of 2 major sets of Wizarding exams. Passing them allows a student to take the next step and go forward to their newts, nastily exhausting Wizarding tests, classes. In the case of potions, Professor Snape will only accept those students that have passed their OWL potions exam with outstanding. Oh, that's great, as certain careers require high newt level potion scores, but if you don't get an O or an exceeds expectation E in the class, then your career choices are limited. Did you know less than 4% of all 5th years get the required O in potions, and most of them are Ravenclaws and Slytherins? An occasional Hufflepuff or Gryffindor may get into the class if they are brilliant enough. However, the Gryffindor student usually drops out within the first 6 weeks due to stress, even if they qualify. It is well known that Professor Snape seems to make it his life's mission to drum out any Gryffindors that have the gall to make it into his newt-level potion class. So what does this say for those wanting careers in their chosen fields that require potions newts, especially healers, aurors, and potions mastery? Now, let's say you have passed everything and have graduated Hogwarts with O's and E's. Now what? The career you want is just waiting for you, right? It depends. Are you a pureblood? If not, then your career choice has just narrowed appreciably. If you are a pureblood and have the right scores on your newts, you can do just about anything you want. While you may start in a lower-level job at the Ministry, you are guaranteed to advance regularly, and there is no limit for advancement. If you are a half-blood, you may start in a low-level office position or as a clerk. After that, it depends on if your pure-blood Ministry-employed relative is willing to call in a favor for you to advance to the next level. Even then, you have to be in high standing with your pure-blood connection. Your chances of getting beyond senior secretary are extremely small. If you have high enough newt grades and have pure-blood connections, you can probably take on an apprenticeship in your chosen field such as healer and hope for advancement to senior healer. If you are a muggle-born, not going to happen. The only ministerial positions open for you are secretarial, custodial, or food service. There is no advancement, only long hours and little to no benefits. The only fields where muggle-born stand a chance are healing and auror. Apprenticeship is almost non-existent. Don't believe me? Check with the Ministry Personnel Office and their job listings. They also have a standard questionnaire for various job openings. In small print at the bottom of most of the forms, it reads, Muggle-borns and those with creature inheritance need not apply. My questions to you are, how many department heads are Muggle-born? How many department subheads are Muggle-born? How many senior secretaries are purebloods? What is the ratio of pureblood to Muggle-born clerks? How many ministers were purebloods, half-bloods, or Muggle-borns? According to my research, I found no department heads and subheads to be Muggle-born or half-bloods. Almost all senior secretaries are purebloods with 1 or 2 exceptions. I had a hard time working out the ratio. I do know that most clerking positions are a jumping-off point for better positions for purebloods. They are, however, as far as most Muggle-borns can advance. The turnover rate in clerk positions within the Ministry is 93%. Why is that? There has never been any Minister of Magic who wasn't a pureblood. It is a documented fact that 95% of all Muggle-borns who have graduated from Hogwarts either leave Britain or return back to the Muggle world for further schooling and better jobs. These students are some of the brightest and best of our graduates. Depending on their pure-blood connections, most half-bloods also leave to seek employment outside Britain. So, coming back to our OWLS and Newts. Why take them if they are so worthless for the majority of our students? It would seem their only purpose is to justify Hogwarts' existence as a school for the minority of purebloods. Oliver Twist. Editor note: several copies of the current employment questionnaires are printed in their entirety on page 5. XL. 18. The clock is ticking. Just where was this Oliver Twist getting his facts? That was on the mind of Cornelius Fudge, Minister of Magic. His plans for Hogwarts were in jeopardy. The whole fiasco with Umbridge was now proving to be his undoing. He should have sent someone with more defense knowledge than Dolores, but no one was more loyal to his cause than her. With Dolores now in Azkaban for torturing students with a dark artifact, Cornelius just wanted to destroy anyone. He fantasized about Potter's head, along with Twist's on a plate, prominently displayed in the atrium of the Ministry. How dare they question his authority? Sirs? A red-headed aide stepped into the office nervously. Yes, Weatherbees? The department head's meeting is ready. Just as you ordered, sir, Percy Weasley said with a slight frown. He hated being called Weatherby, but he was tired of correcting the minister. There were times when he wondered if Fudge deliberately used the wrong name out of spite. The meeting dragged on as Cornelius had expected. He demanded to know the makeup of each department staffing, asking in particular for a breakdown of each position by blood status. He sent Weatherby out in the middle of the meeting for more tea, a calming draft as well as a headache potion. Every department, it seemed, was headed by a pure blood, with one exception. Dirk Cresswell, head of the Goblin Liaison Office, who had claimed to be a pure blood, had just been found to be Muggle-born. Needless to say, he was sacked and imprisoned for falsifying his family tree. However, not many wanted the position anyways. Dealing with the goblins was considered beneath most purebloods. Each department had Muggle-borns holding some positions, but nothing above the minor clerk and secretarial level. A press release was hammered out stating that all ministry employees were hired according to education level and competence. Satisfied with their efforts, everyone went their way. Arthur shook his head as he entered the loo. He understood what Oliver Twist was trying to do with his articles, and he was very impressed with the way Twist was trying to promote change within their world. However, everyone knew it would take more than just mere words in a newspaper to bring about true change. He looked down at the sealed file that hadn't been in his hand when he entered. Looks like another special delivery to the goblins for Twist, he sighed. He quickly and silently cast a wandless disillusionment spell on the file before he left the stall. Arthur had been shocked the first time he'd been ordered to handle such a delivery. It wasn't difficult, nor even dangerous, simply a ministry employee stopping off on his way home for a withdrawal. After his withdrawal, a brief stop at the local market, and then home. The disillusion file was casually left behind for the goblin teller, and Arthur was home free. He did, however, wonder what Croaker was sending Twist. No, not something he was going to dwell on. Sometimes it was better to remain ignorant. Rita Skeeter was also wondering where this Twist brat was getting his information. She would love to strangle the boy, but not before she'd wrung all the juicy information about his sources from his mind. Her thoughts turned to another annoying brat. She still owed Potter and that mudblood bitch that held her captive for so long. She shuddered at the memory of being trapped in that glass jar. With great care, Rita slipped into her boss' office. She knew she would be fired if she was found going through his desk. She just had to get his notes and files on Twist now that the brat was writing for both papers. Old Fudge would pay her double her salary if she could get any dirt on the rabble-rouser. Rita also had a score to settle with Anderson. She couldn't believe the Yank bint got her old job so easily. Rita was sure the Yank was sleeping with Charles. If only she could prove it, then she would be top reporter again. Not to mention, old Cornelius was counting on her to get the dirt. He was in a precarious position right now. It looked like Umbridge was going to take him down with her. Heads were going to roll. She carefully opened Lord Charles's desk, wary of any wards he might have used. Nothing. There was nothing here. Rita searched everywhere, even Anderson's desk. There was nothing to go on. Not even a scrap in the bins that mentioned Twist. What in Merlin's name was she going to do now? She'd have to see if either of them took the files home. She wasn't going to give up. She couldn't. This would be the story of a lifetime. She would write an exposé that would reveal Twist to the world. She, Rita Skeeter, was going to have her former position of top reporter back, and nothing, not even the truth, was going to stand in her way. Albus Dumbledore staggered from Gringotts Bank in shock. The past 3 hours had shaken him to the core. Ragnarok and 7 other high-ranking goblins had grilled him mercilessly about his withdrawals from the Founder's vault. Fortunately, he had been able to provide enough evidence to prove that he had used most of the monies he withdrew for school expenses and for funding the Triwizard tourney. Hogwarts had hosted 2 other schools, thereby incurring higher than normal costs. The remaining monies, some 30,000 galleons, he could not account for as he had used them to fund the order. He was therefore required to repay that amount to the Founder's Fund from his own vault. Albus shuddered. Goblins, hardly the friendliest of beings at the best of times, were absolutely terrifying when angered. He stopped for a bracing whiskey at the Leaky Cauldron, or possibly 2. When he felt settled enough, he operated back to his office. A poorer but wiser man. Phileas Flitwick found his seat at the weekly staff meeting. He looked at his fellow professors. Just about everyone was counting down the month to the Christmas halls. He had been fielding questions and angry comments from his students for the past few days. Albus sighed as he stood to start the meeting. With all the uproar that the Quibbler and Twist have started, I've come across some disturbing news. Hogwarts' charter is at risk. And just why is the charter at risk? Minerva demanded. Hogwarts will close if we cannot maintain the mandates of the Founders. If we lose the Muggleborns and the Half-Bloods, we will be in violation of one, if not 2 of the mandates of our charter. If that happens, then Hogwarts will revert back to the heirs, Albus said, closing his eyes for a moment. And we are already in violation of the 3rd mandate due to ministry interference. But the Board of Governors? Cornelius Fudge wouldn't stand for Hogwarts closing, Minerva insisted. Albus sighed. Nothing the board or the ministry can say or do can prevent it. And as it stands, the ministry is part of the problem. Are there living heirs? Minerva asked, concerned. There are 2. Harry Potter and Tom Riddle. Impossible, several of the staff exclaimed. Afraid so, Albus said, in a tired voice. Does the Potter brat know? Severus asked, leaning back in his chair. Fortunately for us, no, he doesn't. He hasn't been to Gringotts lately, Albus confirmed. Which is a good thing. Why is that, Albus? Phileas asked. Don't you think that the boy deserves to know his heritage? The charms professor sat quietly fuming inside. He didn't like what he was hearing. Albus was putting a whole school at risk with his games. He had remained in the background quietly for years and watched the aged wizard play his many mind games. Some were for the betterment of the wizarding world, and some not. Phileas was furious about the games the headmaster was playing with the life of the Potter boy. Remembering back when Lily's son first entered Hogwarts, the charms master had been appalled at his first view of the child. Harry was the shortest in his year and looked like an unmade bed. His clothes were several sizes too big and terribly worn. The boy was almost skeletal, but most just saw the baggy clothes, not the body beneath them. He had never agreed with the way Albus had handled the boy's placement or education. Albus' philosophy of throwing the boy into the deep end and watching to see whether he sinks or swims was wrong. Anyone with half a mind could see that the boy was drowning in a world he knew nothing about. How long before he buckled under the weight being placed on his thin and undersized shoulders? Albus sighed, turning to the rest of the staff. Anyone have any idea who this Oliver Twist is? Are we no closer to finding anything out? Have you any thoughts on who Mr. Twist is? Severus? Someone with your observation skills surely must have noticed something by now. Pomona Sprout stated. Severus humphed and sneered. I have narrowed it down to 3 possibilities. The person is either a Ravenclaw or a Slytherin. Oh? Why is that? I would have thought Miss Granger would be a candidate. The twins have her down as the odds-on favorite, Phileas asked, intrigued. Severus sneered. Well, since Twist has been delighting in tweaking Miss Granger's nose lately, I would have to say she is the wrong gender to begin with. No, for all of the bravado and daring that Twist is showing in publishing his articles, he will not found be in the lion's house. Severus replied with an arrogant sneer. Minerva huffed and started to speak, but Filius wasn't finished. Indeed, Severus. I found several in Minerva's house quite capable of such enterprise. Name one. Severus sneered as Minerva lunged up with her wand in hand. Filius stood with a huff of indignation, eyeing his two fuming colleagues. Albus, I have lessons to grade. If we are going to go over old ground, I'd rather be doing something more useful with my time. Albus blinked as if called back from whatever musing he was contemplating and nodded. Quite right. Quite right. I was just wondering what else will our Mr. Twist be writing about for his next columns? His face creased in a worried frown, stroking his beard. Filius agreed. We are all wondering as well. I cannot wait. Lord Peter looked over the legal brief he had just been handed. Both he and Lord Harry had been wondering when the man would get off his bum and file the necessary paperwork. Although Sirius Black is now a free man, head of an ancient and noble house and Lord Potter's godfather, Lord Peter knew the man wasn't fit to be a parent. The reports of his doings since being declared a free man were proof enough of that. No. Sirius Black would be in for a rude awakening at the hearing if he thought Harry would tamely allow him to have custody after his recent lack of concern. The stack of files that dealt with the young Potter heir was growing as more information came to light. Albus Dumbledore had a lot to answer for. The number of laws he had broken, wizarding as well as Muggle, was staggering. How could someone with that much power, politically and magically, justify what he did to an innocent baby, a child? One thing was sure, he would have his chance to explain his actions soon in court. 19. Pure Blood versus Muggleborn? Harry walked into the library to finish his charms essay. What he saw made him stop and stare. Hermione Granger was almost buried under a table piled high with books, parchments, and pamphlets. Harry was accustomed to seeing her surrounded by books, but to this extent was highly unusual. He knew, however, a Hermione on a mission was a scary thing, and so he approached warily. Two questions remained. What crusade was she pursuing this time, and how long had she been here? Hermione? Hermione? Harry whispered, looking around for the formidable Miss Pants. Huh? What? Hermione blinked up at him as she put down her quill. Oh, Harry? Well, for someone who has been harassing me for weeks about being her friend, you seem annoyed to see me, Harry said, trying to keep the bitterness out of his voice. He sat in a chair beside her, carefully avoiding the pile of books in front of him. Oh, Harry, it isn't that, Hermione said with a sigh. She looked around then whispered. I'm trying to prove that Oliver Twist is wrong about career choices in the wizarding world. I mean, Professor McGonagall said I could be anything I wanted, including the future Minister of Magic. And now? Harry asked. Hermione looked like she was ready to burst into tears. Twist was right. In the history of the Ministry, no Muggle-born has ever risen to the position of minister. In fact, only one half-blood ever did, and that's because he was born to an ancient and noble pure-blood house himself, and had the full backing of that house. Why, Harry? Why did Professor McGonagall lie to me? Have you asked her? Hermione sighed, rubbed her eyes, and shook her head. I've been afraid, too. Are you a Gryffindor or not, Hermione? Harry challenged her. There's nothing wrong with asking questions. It's not illegal. It had come as quite a blow to Harry, too, when the Unspeakables had answered his questions about careers in the wizarding world. According to them, about the only way a Muggle-born could get anywhere was to marry into a well-to-do pure-blood family, like his mother had. And, according to the goblins, the Potter men had been a law unto themselves. They'd had the political clout and wealth to do whatever they wanted. Unfortunately, now that Harry was the last of his ling and still underage with almost no training in the political arena, the Potter clout was fading away. The goblins blamed Dumbledore more than anyone for that. Harry was pretty sure the old meddler had his own reasons for leaving him so woefully ignorant of his heritage, but he couldn't figure out what they were. the goblins, and Lord Peter mentioned something about a prophecy which was being very closely watched, not only by the unspeakables but by Dumbledore as well. If Harry wanted to view that prophecy, it would have to wait until the Christmas halls when he was away from Hogwarts and Dumbledore's control. "I'm sorry, Hermione," Harry said, bringing his thoughts back to the present. "What for?" "It isn't your fault," Hermione sniffed, rubbing her eyes. "I'm going to owl my parents with these stastics. They'll probably pull me from Hogwarts. And furthermore, I'm going to advise every other Muggle-born in this school to do the same." The heads of the job placement, career management, and ministry panel were having their own meeting after Fudge threw down the ultimatum. "How many Muggle-borns hold you for information?" asked the head of job placement. "About 378 adults and 38 minors, including a very irate Muggle-born by the name of Hermione Granger." "Isn't she one of Potter's little friends?" asked the head of career management. "Oh yes," came a reply, with rolled eyes. She wanted to know why she was even given a talk about career opportunities if she wasn't going to get anywhere in the ministry. "What did you tell her?" "That it was against ministry policy to give out that information. What Albus Dumbledore says and does to encourage meaningless expectations in his students isn't the fault of this department." "Good one, mate. Good one." Harry watched as the snow fell from the night sky. It was too cold to really go wandering around tonight. Warming charms and wool socks can only do so much to keep a body warm. He really couldn't sneak out to do any business tonight either. Ron and his dorm mates had decided to have an all-night party. Harry missed discussing things with Lord Peter. He had helped Harry in so many ways. The man may never be the father figure Harry had always longed for, but he has proven trustworthy. Lord Peter had gone so far as asking about Harry's studies, how his time was spent, and if there was anything he wanted to discuss outside of their professional relationship. The man had taught Harry so much about the wizarding world, his duties as a lord and obligations, protocol, etiquette, and law. Lessons that both Dumbledore and Sirius had neglected. Harry could understand Dumbledore's reasons. The old coot wanted to keep Harry under his control, but it was Sirius that Harry couldn't figure out. Unless Sirius figured Dumbledore had already fulfilled that obligation and there wasn't a need. That would take some thought. "Hey, Harry, come join us," called Seamus. "Yeah, mate. You're missing out," laughed Dean. "I'll leave him alone, guys." "Harry's not into friendships anymore," mumbled a drunken Ron. "He's still pissed that we didn't buddy up to him over the summer." "Well, if a friend promised to write, then didn't, I would be pissed too," said Neville, who was slightly less drunk than the others. "Especially the way he was locked up." "Not you two, mate."
"Ard,"
Ron exclaimed. "We cowlent. Mum, and then end up an ol' shiskerpoosh wowent low it. So? Ne'er stopped you before. If my besh mate was countin' on me," slurred Seamus. Ron threw a pillow at Seamus, who threw it at Dean, who threw it at Neville. Soon there was a full-blown pillow fight in progress. Harry got involved when 3 pillows pounded him at once. Grabbing one, he just had to defend himself. Soon feathers, bits of pillow ticking, and fluff flew everywhere. The boys laughed, tearing up the dorm in a rip-roaring, drunken brawl. "Great Caesar's ghost! What in Merlin's name is going on in here?" shouted Professor McGonagall as she stepped into the dorm. "You would think someone was dying in here from all the ruckus." "Explain yourselves." Seamus tried to hide the rum bottle, as Ron tried the same with his fire whiskey. "Nothin', Professor. We were just," Seamus said, pausing only to let out a very loud belch. "Oops," he snickered sheepishly. "Clean this mess, immediately, and get ready for bed. I will deal with your punishments tomorrow morning." 5 boys' voices echoed. "Yes, Professor McGonagall." The next morning, Harry and his dorm mates appeared in their head's office. Only Harry and Neville awoke that morning without a headache. The two looked at each other and shrugged. They doubted that anyone was going to get to visit the infirmary this morning. That meant their roommates would just have to live with their hangovers. "I overlook many things in my house, even the occasional drunkenness. But when I am awakened out of a sound sleep by a prefect who had repeatedly tried to tone down your fun, I draw the line. What do you have to say for yourselves?" Harry and Neville looked at each other. Neither would rat out their dorm mates. However, Ron was a different matter. He couldn't keep his mouth shut. We was having a bit of fun. Trying to get Harry to let loose, Ron said, clutching his head. I see, the professor said, looking over at Harry. Do you have anything to say, Mr. Potter? Professor? Neville jumped in before Harry could speak. Harry only got involved in the fight well after it was started. He was busy watching it snow. And you, Mr. Longbottom? Neville shrugged. I was in it for the fun. I see. Well, 10 points each for disturbing everyone's rest, including mine. You will clean up your dorm without help. And I should let you boys with a hangover deal with it alone, and not send you to the infirmary. Ron, Dean, and Seamus groaned in pain. However, I am not that cruel. You may go to the infirmary after you clean up your dorm. I am sure Madame Pomfrey will have something to say about your condition in very loud voice. You may go. She dismissed them with a smirk. Mr. Potter, please stay behind. When the door closed behind the last one out, the very stern witch turned to Harry, her eyes softening a bit. I understand you are planning to spend Christmas with Sirius, Mr. Potter. Is that right? Yes, ma'am. He invited me, Harry said. He'd been of two minds about accepting the invitation. He realized it would be expected of him. He just wasn't sure if it fitted into his plans. I am also informed that he has applied for custody of you. The headmaster isn't too pleased. I know, Professor. I've already had a talk with the headmaster. He feels Sirius isn't fully recovered from his ordeal, and that returning to my aunt's is for the best, Harry said with a sigh, rubbing the back of his neck. Professor? What do you think? What I think isn't important, Mr. Potter. My only concern is knowing that you've thought it out fully, and understand just what all is entailed. Believe me, Professor, I realize that, Harry said. Typical, he thought. Why do I even bother asking for advice from her? Well, I won't keep you, Mr. Potter. Thank you, Professor. Sirius was enjoying his morning cuppa when his copy of the Quibbler arrived. He was enjoying it more and more as Twist started putting digs into long-standing pure-blood traditions and bigotry. Opening his copy, Sirius' eyes grew wider as he read. Pure blood versus Muggleborn, who will win? Today I came across an interesting sight. Hermione Granger being reamed out by Madame Pants. That's right. The know-it-all of Gryffindor was being lectured about the care of books. And what brought that on? Why me, of course. One thing that our Ravenclawish Gryffindor can't stand is being bested. I knew something that she didn't. From the gossip I heard in passing, she refused to leave the library until she found every bit of information about career placements for Muggleborns. Well, I could have told her that the information wasn't there. The information is in the Hall of Records and in the Ministry Library which, by now, Minister Cornelius Fudge has locked down tighter than Professor Snape's potion cabinets. I should know. I olled for some information and was told everything had been sealed by order of the minister. Now, just what is the good minister afraid of? Could this mean that I am right and the minister just doesn't want to face the truth? Could he be afraid that the Muggleborns would view this as another attempt to control them and keep them second-class citizens? Do the Muggleborns know they outpopulate purebloods by 12 to 1? That many of their Muggleborn kindred are leaving magical Britain, and by leaving, they take the future of our magical communities with them? Fact, the birth rate of Muggleborn children, in recent years, outnumbers the pure-blooded by 7 to 1. That means for every one pure-blood born, there are 7 Muggleborns. Half-blood children also outnumber the purebloods by 3 to 1. These figures do not take into account those children of pure-blood families born as squibs. Fact, if one did a heritage test on Muggleborns, you would find that they, in fact, have at least several magical or squib ancestors in their family lines. I found this out by querying the goblins. Not only do they keep self-updating records, they can administer the heritage test for a small fee, of course. Fact, test results of performance on practical level exams of Hogwarts students in the past decade show that Muggleborn and half-bloods, on average, hold more magical power in their core than the pure-blood students. Fact, within pure-blood families, the birth rate for squibs and birth defects has risen appreciably in the past century. Again, you can find this out in the Hall of Records. Well, you could, but by now, the minister has sealed off access to all department records. I'll let you in on a secret. The goblins also have these records. They are needed for inheritance purposes, and for a fee you can get a copy of them along with a blood seal assuring their authenticity. In doing the math, I've come up with a very horrifying discovery. The Muggle population in Britain, as of the year 1995, Great Britain ranked 20th in world with a Muggle population of 58,426,014. As of 1995, the British wizarding world population numbered less than 75,000. Again, if you don't believe me, ask yourself this. Why is everyone in the ministry so afraid that they have sealed off key areas where this information can be found? These records are a matter of public domain. In other words, you have the right to access them freely. It would seem that our minister has overstepped his authority. I ask you now, can we afford losing one drop of magical blood, no matter its source? Before anyone gets too upset, I must point out that I got most of my information by writing to the International Wizarding Council and the Muggle British Census Department. I found it interesting that the IWC, too, is keeping abreast of Britain's wizarding world's declining numbers. They haven't gotten involved as it is an internal affair, but as more and more Muggle-borns leave Britain to make a better life for themselves and strengthen their new homelands, the concern grows. Oliver Twist. 20. A call for treason. The day after Oliver Twist's column appeared in the Quibbler, the atrium of the ministry was filled with irate people demanding explanations. The witches and wizards manning the information desks had, by mid-morning, called for Aurors to guarantee their safety. As if that wasn't enough chaos, hundreds of owls soon filled the space above the floor, each one fighting for a place to land and be relieved of their letter. Between the screaming of angry people, hooting of impatient owls, and the resultant flurry of feathers and owl droppings, it didn't take the Aurors long to close off all entrances to the ministry. Many repelling charms, along with threats of arrest, later, and the atrium was quiet once more. The shell-shocked personnel and weary Aurors were given restorative and calming drafts before being sent home.
Oh.
While the Aurors were busy in the atrium, an emergency meeting of the Gringotts was called for that afternoon. To have their way of life questioned in such a blatantly disrespectful manner offended them deeply. As the membership filed into the Gringotts chambers, few took note of the many seats that remained empty. All seats were inherited, passed down through the generations from one pureblood head of house their heir. The empty seats were sad reminders of the many family lines that had died out, for one reason or another. Several seats were held by proxy by another noble house as the current heir was either a minor or had been disowned by the family head and declared as unfit to serve. Many seats went vacant because of the war with He Who Must Be Named. He had targeted certain families, wiping them out root and branch, leaving no known survivors. No one knew why they had been so thoroughly eradicated save the one who ordered their demise. Albus Dumbledore, supreme mugwump of the Gringotts, held several proxies, including the Potter seat. Many wondered if the old wizard would willingly yield it to Potter when he came of age. It was a well-known fact that Albus Dumbledore held his power close. Overlord Ragnarok. A flustered goblin panted, "You are needed on the main floor, my liege." Ragnarok looked up from the papers he was reading. "What is it, stone laid?" "The floor is filled with wizards and witches, all wanting to take the heritage test." Stoneblade wrung his hands. "Those wishing to actually do business with us are being crowded out." Heaving a long-suffering sigh, the elder goblin rose from his ornate desk. "Very well, call up another cohort of guards in full armor and meet me on the main floor in 5 minutes. Steelblade didn't bother to answer, simply turned and ran from the room. "Ah, Oliver Twist. I knew you were going to poke the anthill," Ragnarok chuckled. Turning to his desk and carefully gathering the papers he'd been reading, he placed them in a small hidden vault for later. He then quietly left the office, closing the heavily warded door softly. The main floor of the bank was churning with activity. Wizards and witches were struggling to get to an open teller, all of them waving a copy of the Quibbler at any goblin who made eye contact. "Silence," a guttural voice roared. "Those wishing the heritage test will follow me." The armored and fully armed goblin turned and stalked down a long hall. At the end of it, double doors stood open, revealing a large room with 4 desks, each manned by a goblin. When the guard reached the open doors, he turned to face the crowd behind him and snarled, "You will form 4 lines as you pass these doors. You will wait your turn. If you cause problems, you will be removed, point one way or another." He then turned to stand beside the doors, rested the shaft of his gleaming halberd on the floor, and allowed those behind him to enter. The first people to pass him inched by warily, eyes on the wicked weapon in his hand. It quickly became obvious that he wasn't the only armed guard in the room. Behind each desk sat a goblin, and behind him stood another, armed and ready. The first test, going back 100 years, would cost 5 galleons. For every 100 years further back the client wished to delve into their heritage, it would cost 1 galleon more. The testing began with quiet efficiency. Ragnarok was glad Harry had given him a heads-up on his latest Quibbler column. He'd had his potion staff working overtime to be ready. The elder goblin chuckled to himself. "Might have to make that boy an honorary goblin if he keeps adding to our coffers this way. If this doesn't wake up the pure-blooded fools, nothing will. I wonder, do wizards have family reunions?" His cackle made those who heard it shiver.
Oh.
The headlines in both the Quibbler and the Daily Prophet the next morning blared out the results of the emergency session. Special edition. Emergency Wizengamot session issues arrest warrant for Oliver Twist for treason. Yesterday afternoon, in an emergency session of the Wizengamot, a majority vote was passed for the immediate arrest of Oliver Twist for treason. "He is threatening our way of life," said Cornelius Fudge, Minister of Magic. "This Oliver Twist must be stopped." The facts Oliver Twist, is mentioning in his articles are taken out of context and only serve to incite panic and foment insurrection, said one Wizengamot member, who asked not to be named. Mr. Twist's articles started last summer in the Quibbler as a letter to the editor asking questions. Last September, Mr. Twist was hired by the Quibbler as a columnist. Later, the column was picked up by the Daily Prophet. Rumors have it that 2 more newspapers are vying for the syndication rights as well. "My daughter enjoys the ways he pokes at the old fusspots," said another Wizengamot member, who also wished to be unnamed. "I had to side with the minister, though. Mr. Twist is attacking our way of life and must be stopped." Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, DMLE, was unavailable for comment. However, her department issued a brief statement on her behalf. "The law must be upheld at all costs. We will comply with the wishes of the Wizengamot in pursuing this matter to the fullest extent of the law. Anyone with information about Oliver Twist is asked to contact the DMLE immediately." On the back page of the paper was a small advertisement that read, "To all citizens. The Ministry Library and Hall of Records are closed to the public until further notice. Further, anyone needing copies of records must submit paperwork to the Ministry stating who wants the information, the purpose of the request, and who will have access to said information. Individuals requesting sealed information will also be required to take an oath prohibiting the use of said information for any purposes save that stated. Sharing of this information with any unauthorized persons will have severe legal consequences. By order of Cornelius Fudge, Minister of Magic." Albus looked over the students in the Great Hall as many read the announcement. A low grumbling noise could be heard. Many of the pure-blood students looked vindicated. Draco Malfoy was looking particularly pompous today. He wore a satisfied smirk and laughed arrogantly every time he heard a Muggleborn or Ravenclaw give an indignant squeak. A glance at the Gryffindor table showed they were as outraged as the others. That didn't look promising. Of all the houses, the Gryffs were the most volatile, plunging head first with little thought for consequences when they took up a cause. And since 1/2, or better, of their house were Muggleborns and half-bloods, there was going to be trouble. Albus gave a despondent sigh. Life just got more complicated. Severus sneered as he read the article.
"Well,
that's that," he said, folding the paper. "How so?" Minerva asked, over her teacup. If anything, the Wizengamot just validated Mr. Twist's articles. By closing the Hall of Records, Cornelius confirms that the information in Mr. Twist's article was correct. Phileas smiled. The American Muggles have a saying, "It's like closing the barn door after the animal has escaped." Severus snorted as he stood. Well, with the ministry closing ranks, it is going to be difficult to prove, isn't it? Only if you don't know where to look, Phileas muttered to himself. Their stupidity knows no bounds. Snapped Pomona. They are so terrified of a child's words that they want him arrested for treason? Not even he who must not be named has earned that kind of a response. I guess what they say is true, that the truth hurts. Ragnarok was relaxing in his private office after a long day of overseeing the chaos caused by Oliver Twist's column. He was just raising a crystal goblet to his lips for a final sip of goblin whiskey when he was once more interrupted. "My Lord Ragnarok," a hesitant voice squeaked. "The Mistress of Knowledge is here to speak with you."
"What?"
Ragnarok almost choked.
"Why?"
"Never mind. Show her in immediately." He stood, quickly, spelled his robes clean and waited respectfully for her to enter. His bow was low and reverent as the small cloaked and hooded figure swept into his presence. "Greetings, revered lady. How may this warrior serve you?" Amelia Bones was beyond pissed. To have her name come up in the special edition and have someone in her own department dare to issue a statement without her knowledge was infuriating. However, picking up a file out of a concealed vault, she smiled. She would deal with her department's leak soon enough. This was more important. She stepped out of her office and announced that she was out for the day and left a set of standing orders. No one was to talk to any reporters, and if any information on Mr. Twist did come in, everyone was to sit on it until her return. No one from DMLE was to talk to anyone outside the department for any reason. If they did, they would be walking a permanent beat at Azkaban, without hazard pay. An hour later found Amelia quietly sipping tea at number 10, Downing Street, as the Prime Minister looked through a file stuffed with reports and newspaper clippings. She was a creature of law, and while a pureblood, could no longer condone the bigotry and prejudices of the wizarding world. To condemn a child for treason was unconscionable. She tried to persuade the Wisingamot not to go the route they took, but only a handful listened. Now, they would have to pay the price for their arrogance. She was not about to let anyone railroad another person into Azkaban without due process, not while she was department head of law enforcement. "There is more to this, isn't there?" the Prime Minister queried, looking up from the papers he was scanning. "Yes, sir. There is." Arthur was worried as he stepped out of the loo. This was wrong on so many levels. People were forgetting the lessons learned when Sirius Black was found to be innocent of all charges after spending 12 years in Azkaban. His contacts told him to sit tight and wait out the storm in silence. "Mr. Weasley?" called a clerk, running towards him. "Yes, Marge. There's an emergency departmental heads meeting in 30 minutes. Oh, Merlin's name, now what? Rita Skeeter was in 7th heaven. She had just been handed a license to smear Twist's reputation to the four winds. Any dirt she could find would be published by order of the ministry under the guise of public safety. He was to be made an example of for the greater good. According to her directive, she had been given license to tag along with the Aurors when they questioned the editors of the Quibbler and the Prophet. As stated by this Twist's articles, he's a student currently attending Hogwarts. Someone in that maze of hallways and classrooms should know, at least something. Should she wait for the Aurors to turn their attention in that direction, or use her animagus form and just hang around? It was amazing the things one could overhear when one was too small to be noticed. Harry was reading a note penned to him from Zeno Lovegood. "If you want to view paradise, simply look around and view it," he whispered to himself. Harry smiled. He was sure he had heard that quote before, but not sure where. At least he was safe for the moment. The remedial lessons were easier to bear now that Harry, thanks to Healer Atwaters, had a handle on it. Sure, he was still getting mind-raped twice a week, but at least Snape couldn't find what Harry didn't want him to. "Oh, there you are," came a childish sing-song voice from a small alcove. "Did the Nargles hide you again?" Harry paused, stunned. A slender figure with long blonde hair appeared in front of him, wearing Ravenclaw robes. "Hello, Harry Potter. Did you lose something too?" she asked in a dreamy voice. No," Harry replied, a bit confused. "If you want to view paradise," she said as she turned away, "simply look around. Don't worry, Daddy will protect you. He's good at that." She started to skip away. "Huh. What? Who are you?" Harry called after her. Why, I'm Luna Lovegood. Her breathy voice drifted back to him as she disappeared down the stairs. 21. Don't get mad, get even. Zeno Lovegood sat in the office of the Daily Prophet drinking tea along with Emily Anderson, Lord Charles, and 2 barristers. The 5 were going over the edict that had come down from the Wizengamot. Surrender all information on Oliver Twist or face a year in Azkaban for abetting treason.
Well,
Emily asked, nervously. After all, she was the one that gave the note to Mr. Lovegood, which started this chain of events. One of the barristers, a middle-aged man in a rumpled mixture of muggle and wizarding attire, cleared his throat and in a husky, whiskey voice spoke up. The Wizengamot doesn't have a case. In fact, they are breaking several of their own laws, not to mention the Queen's treaty themselves. Oh, is that treason as well? Emily asked. I would rather have thought that it was more like sedition instead of treason. It is indeed, said Lord Peter. However, in their arrogance, the Ministry of Magic are usurping the Crown's authority. They have no right to declare treason. Lord Peter looked through the file in his hand. My esteemed colleague, Mr. Horace Rumpole, and I have read Mr. Twist's articles with great relish. It is about time someone started to ask questions. That the someone asking questions is a teenage boy is perfect. However, Horace Rumpole chuckled, sounding as if he was clearing his throat. Looking a bit gleeful, he added, nothing in these articles promotes treason, or even sedition. Nothing the boy wrote is false nor does it, fomenting insurrection. In fact, according to what he did write, it was understated at best and drawn from ministry records themselves. If I didn't know any better, I would say that someone on the inside, perhaps the unspeakables, are helping him. Lord Charles sputtered into his teacup. Surely you don't mean that, Horace. What is your proof? Horace looked thoughtful for a moment. The information is too wide in scope, too inclusive for a schoolboy to know. Even if he does profess his source is the Hall of Records, the amount of time he would have to spend to find his information would hardly leave him time for his schoolwork. No, I would say that the unspeakables may well be helping him. They are the only ones who would have unlimited access to the information, sealed or not. Now, this information isn't to be published or leave this room. The barrister gave a knowing look to the editors and reporter. So, what do we do now? Lord Charles huffed. The ministry has issued a writ for us to turn over any and all documentation we have on Oliver. I, for one, don't want to go to Azkaban, but I refuse to give up a fellow journalist. What little we do know will hardly satisfy the ministry, and as for documentation, most of that lies with the goblins, and I wish the ministry would try and force them to hand it over. Zeno grimaced. That's where I come in, Lord Peter soothed. I am the barrister for the Potter family. As you know, they own major shares in both your papers, and since I am their attorney of record, I am here to protect their interest. I suggest that if the ministry is so anxious to get their hands on Oliver Twist that you post a special edition detailing just how you plan on responding to their illegal demands. Quite right. Demand that your complaint be taken to a court of law, Rumpole chuckled. That would in effect nullify the Wizengamot's ability to rule on this matter. It would be a conflict of interest. That would only leave an international wizarding or Her Majesty's court. Hermione plopped down beside Harry with a crumpled letter in her hand. Harry, can we talk? Harry looked up. About what? He asked, warily. I got a reply back from my parents. I told them that my career options were next to nil after Twist's article. Oh. Harry asked, putting down the essay he was working on. He took in her harried appearance. Something wrong. They're talking about pulling me from Hogwarts after my OWLS. They said that they refused to pay for substandard education. They offered to hire tutors for me to catch up on my Muggle education. I have to make up my mind on what I want. Harry sighed and pulled his friend into his arms as she sniffled, snuggling closer. Don't worry, Hermione. It'll work itself out. You were right, Harry, she whispered into his shirt. I should not have listened to Professor Dumbledore. I'm so sorry. Will you ever forgive me? That evening, a special edition of both the Quibbler and the Daily Prophet came out. As both papers were running Oliver Twist's articles, both were coming under fire. Special edition. Ministry and Wizengamot in violation of basic tenets of British law. Could their actions threaten the wizarding world? Since the vote to arrest Oliver Twist for treason was handed down and sanctioned by both the Wizengamot and the Minister of Magic, both the Daily Prophet and the Quibbler have been brought under heavy criticism by the ruling and judicial bodies of our government. However, these venerable bodies have failed to uphold the laws they were sworn on their magic to uphold. If the Ministry and the Wizengamot wish to pursue legal action, they must file such action in a court of law and rule themselves out as said court due to conflict of interest. That would leave their only recourse the ICW or Her Majesty's Court. We, of the Daily Prophet and the Quibbler, refuse to turn over any information about Mr. Oliver Twist. The newspaper has the right to protect their sources and staff against persecution if the articles published can be verified. As of this date, all of Mr. Twist's articles can be proven as fact. He assures us he has the original copies of his facts and statistics. We stand behind Mr. Twist and applaud him on his integrity. Lord Charles Witherspoon, Zeno Lovegood, Editors-in-Chief, Daily Prophet, The Quibbler. Harry was sitting in the common room. He hadn't been able to escape all week from his friends. They had been clinging to him like limpets. It was as if they were on a mission to track him down and poke their noses into his business. Hermione was especially clingy since her parents' letter. Harry wanted to pull his hair out. As he stared into the blazing fire in the fireplace, his thoughts were on the arrest warrant for Oliver. He had to admit that he was very nervous about being arrested. It brought back the memories of the past summer, a locked room and food through a cat flap. Harry shuddered. Professor Flitwick had reassured Harry that his lips were sealed. No one was going to hear anything about Mr. Twist from him. Further, he confided to Harry with a toothy smile, goblins are immune to occlumency and veritasrum. Harry looked down at the Marauder's map and noted that Rita was also on the prowl. She had been at the castle for a week now trying to get information on Oliver. All luck to her, she'd need it, Harry thought with a smirk. She had been harassing students and staff all week. He was sure she spent as much time as a beetle as she did a human trying to get any gossip she could. The rumor mill was going crazy and many students were running scared. Harry had taken the precaution of spelling his bed, the area around it, and the bed curtains to repel all insects. He snorted. It was times like this that he wished he had a few muggle items here. Ant traps came to mind, as did a fly swatter. Dobby had also been warned of her animagus form and been promised several sets of warm and colorful socks if he managed to capture her in beetle form. The house elf was currently dressed in khaki shorts and a safari hat, stalking the halls invisibly, large glass jar in one hand and a lid in the other. He could have sworn that he heard Dobby once say, "Here, Buggy, Buggy, Buggy." Harry was wondering when they would start breaking out the truth serum and calling for loyalty oaths. He wondered how he was going to manage if and when they did. Now, if only he could just get away from Hermione's obsessive need to study and Ron's demands for chess matches. Cornelius Fudge walked into number 10, Downing Street, for his quarterly meeting with the Prime Minister. He was convinced this would be a typical short meeting. Except for the business with that brat Oliver Twist, Cornelius really didn't have much to report, and the less he reported, the better for all concerned. The wizarding government was running smoothly, with no sign of the return of he who must not be named, despite what Dumbledore and the Potter brat said. No, this meeting would be a pleasant chat, bit of tea, and a few platitudes. Business as usual. Come in, Cornelius, said the Prime Minister with a cold, predatory smile. Have a seat and give me one good reason why I shouldn't have your Wizengamot disbanded with you and Albus Dumbledore up on charges. After all, you both are leaders of a government that is denying more than half of its citizens their rights under British law. Well, maybe not all tea and crumpets. Fudge whimpered. Harry finally got some time alone. He was sitting in his bed, with Dobby standing guard. It was early, and he had pleaded a headache. Of course, Hermione wanted to take him to Madame Pomfrey right away, and Ron wanted to get Professor McGonagall. However, it was Seamus that spoke up. He looks fine to me. Maybe he just wants some time alone? You two have been hanging on him all week. Maybe he wants to wank alone, unless you want to hold his willy for him. He leered, waggling his eyebrows suggestively. Hermione yawned and blushed. Ron looked like he was about to be ill, as everyone in the common room laughed. Harry blushed heavily, but didn't say anything. Trust Seamus to come up with a very lewd idea. Bless him. Hey Seamus, you said I could borrow your latest playwitch, right? Harry called back, ensuring that he would definitely be alone for the time being. He grinned as Hermione and Ron fled the dorm for the library and parts unknown. It wasn't wanking or anything of that nature, even if he did have the copy of Playwitch tucked under his pillow. He was too busy going over everything that Lord Peter had sent him and all the mail from both editors. At least he didn't have to worry about Rita. She was hanging around the Ravenclaw dorms tonight, hoping to find a clue that would lead her to Oliver. The betting pool had given her many ideas on just who Oliver could be, but no student was willing to come out and speak to her. So far, Harry had been reassured that neither editor would give any information to the Oars. He wasn't too sure about Dumbledore. The old coot was awfully quiet on the subject. Also, one of the letters he had received from Dobby was very strange. It was from Ragnarok and contained a small corked vial. It looked empty, and Harry puzzled over it until he read the letter it came with. Dear Lord Potter, please place your memory of the ritual used to restore the Dark Wizard in this vial.
It may be crucial to your quest.
Ragnarok. Harry decided he would puzzle over the strange request later as he took pen to paper and wrote his next article. Mayhem, sedition, and treason? As I sit back and watch the mayhem that my articles are generating, I have to wonder, why am I wanted for treason? Where is the treason in asking questions of adults or in stating true facts? Is it not the job of adults to teach children about their world and answer their questions truthfully? How are we supposed to learn unless we ask questions? Even questions that might provoke and dismay those in power. How else is a child to learn? I sit in the Great Hall and watch as professors of great learning and supposed wisdom run around as if the world is on fire and they don't have a clue how to put it out. Why are they searching for me, instead of defending my right to ask the difficult and embarrassing questions? They, after all, are the teachers. Everyone says that Hogwarts is the safest place to be in all of the wizarding world. I can't say I believe it. Is having dozens of Dementors attack a Quidditch pitch full of helpless students safe? Is being petrified in the halls safe? Is being told by the headmaster to stay away from a certain corridor if you value your life safe? Is having a troll running loose in school safe? I, for one, think the answer to all of these questions is a resounding no. It would seem some of the teachers, including the headmaster, are too concerned with their image and the school's reputation to worry about student safety. It also must be mentioned the extent to which they are willing to go to maintain the status quo. Better, they should be giving the students the tools they need to live a long, productive, and well-informed life. My last observation needs to be shouted aloud until it sinks into the hearts and minds of the administrators of this school. Quit dividing the school between houses and bloodlines. The Sorting Hat is right, and if an inanimate magical artifact can see the problem, then one would think the wise and learned could as well. Now is the time to band together, before the world as we know it ceases to exist due to blind prejudices. It really is much simpler to repair something before it is completely crumbled to ruin than it is to build anew. Especially true of the wizarding world. Once we are outed to the muggles, there is no going back. 3 things that can never be recalled: a loosed arrow, a cast spell, and a secret revealed. Last, I'm very disappointed, but not surprised, that the wizarding government is calling for my arrest. A wise muggle once said, a long habit of not thinking a thing wrong gives it a superficial appearance of being right. The man was Thomas Paine, born in England, was one of the founding fathers of the United States. I doubt many purebloods know him, especially not Bins. I will keep writing as long as I am able. Thank you all that support me. I am but a voice calling in the darkness, looking for a candle to light my way. Oliver Twist. 22. Time for a history lesson. Albus Dumbledore sat in his throne-like chair in the Wisengamot chamber as the members filed in. Cornelius Fudge had called another session 3 days after the article in the Daily Prophet came out. Although Albus had been against the measure to issue an arrest warrant for Mr. Twist, he was curious to see what information had been gathered. If the Oars returned with Mr. Twist in tow, so much the better. Well, Cornelius, get on with it, snapped Augusta Longbottom impatiently. 2 emergency sessions in a week is a bit extreme, even for you. So, what is your knickers in a twist this time? A few nervous titters could be heard. Cornelius looked pained as he stood at the podium. Picking up a parchment scroll, he read, "By royal decree the warrant for the arrest of Oliver Twist is declared null and void." Several gasps and murmurs came from the seated members. The body known hereafter as the Wisengamot is not invested with the authority to call for the arrest of one of our citizens for treason. Facts, as presented to us, show no acts of treason but rather questions from a teenage minor concerning the rights of our citizens. Let it therefore be known. A low growl rumbled through the chamber as Cornelius paused. The scroll in his hands shook visibly. He licked his lips nervously as he glanced around. Never had he been so thankful for the protection charms on the chamber that prohibited spell casting by its members or spectators. In the past, several members had died due to hexing by irate constituents. After the last episode, the chamber had been spelled to quell all magics cast by anyone save the Ors. He gulped a quick sip of water and then continued, "Let it be known that we, Elizabeth II, Queen of the United Kingdom, House of Windsor, are greatly displeased with the governing body of the wizarding world. Equality, under the law, is granted to all subjects of our realm, not to a select few. That this body so promotes such prejudices as to deny our citizens, fettered or free, legal rights under our laws due to blood status or heritage, is against the laws of our Commonwealth and the treaties signed by your forefathers. It shall cease forthwith, lest you earn our further displeasure. The bodies of the Wisengamot and position of Minister of Magic are hereby apprised that if this situation is not corrected by the end of the year, then we will have no choice but to declare the magical portion of the Magna Carta, along with several other treaties, in abeyance. Should this become necessary, then the governing of the wizarding world will be returned to our proper rule and all wizarding governing bodies will be disbanded." Cornelius Fudge cringed as he read the royal signature. A deadly calm filled the chamber. "Just who is this upstart muggle? What rights does she have over us?" shouted Lucius Malfoy as he and several other purebloods stood in anger while others began to speak. "By what right does she dictate to us?" shouted another. "Are you mad?" shouted Madame Longbottom over the pandemonium. When the noise died, "Enough," she went on to say. "Did not your tutors teach you about English government? She is no mere muggle. She has been our sovereign since 1952. You would do well to remember this. The royal family is from a long line of squibs," sputtered Madame Marchbanks. "Every now and then, one of them has enough magic to get a letter from Hogwarts. But there are no royals at Hogwarts now." "No," Albus interjected. "None of the current royal family have shown any signs of active magic. So, now what do? How did we get into this mess?" A very pale-faced Cornelius opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at a red-faced, sneering Lucius Malfoy. Albus closed his eyes and bowed his head, stroking his beard. It was all coming home to roost. He would not be surprised if he received a summons from the Prime Minister soon as well. After all, he did preside over the Wisengamot, and it was his duty to keep Cornelius in check as much as possible. Wisengamot served notice by royal decree. By Emily Anderson. Today, in front of the Wisengamot and this reporter, Cornelius Fudge stood up and read a declaration from Her Royal Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II. For those that don't know who this is, she is the royal sovereign that rules all of Great Britain, magical as well as muggle. The royal family is from a long line of squibs dating back to the time of King Arthur. However, it was King John in 1215 who signed a document called the Magna Carta granting certain rights and liberties to all citizens. King John also signed a magical document granting the first of many concessions to the wizarding world, provided that they did not go against British law. To keep the wizarding world free from Muggle interference, several treaties were put in place, giving wizards the right to self-rule so long as they honored the basic tenets of British law. By royal decree, we the wizarding world must come under proper compliance with Muggle laws, or our world will cease to exist as we know it. To keep our world a secret and to continue with self-rule, we must comply. Merlin help us all. Lord Voldemort crumpled the newspaper in a towering rage.
How dare they?
Those Muggles have no right to wipe away centuries of traditions just like that. He would not allow it. Lord Salazar Slytherin must be turning in his grave. He, as Slytherin's heir, would make them pay for their arrogance. After Dumbledore and the brat, of course. Arthur Weasley wasn't a man to be rattled easily. After all, he was father to two very resourceful and mischievous boys that thought nothing of making their brothers miserable. Well, he wished he knew who Oliver Twist was. The Weasley patriarch was torn with pride and dismay at the mayhem. In 6 months the boy had done what no one else had ever accomplished. He had served the Wizarding World notice that there was a problem, and if they weren't going to fix it, someone else would. The only good thing was the boy had managed to stop Molly from sending howlers. Merlin, that woman had a voice when she got going, but he still loved her dearly. A memo made its way to Arthur's desk. It was a standard memo by all accounts. After he deciphered the hidden code, Arthur realized he was called to a meeting. Deep in the heart of the Ministry was a department that few had little knowledge of. The meeting room was narrow, with a long, well-polished slab of marble for a table with many wooden high-backed chairs around it. 8 hooded figures walked in. It was hard to tell how many were men and how many were women, as they all wore long hooded gray robes. The voluminous robes had concealment, comfort, and anti-tracking spells on them, as well as sticking and masking charms on the hoods. Their leader sat at the head of the table. Report. Everyone gave a report on the current situation, but no one had any idea who Oliver Twist was. The clues were there, but a key factor seemed missing. One hooded figure reported that it was Amelia Bones who'd alerted the Prime Minister of their current situation. Many were pleased that she had done so. A few had hoped for a little more time to prepare. Enough, Croaker said. If all are agreeable, I would like to offer this Oliver Twist a position with us. Why? For one, he is good at concealing himself. Even we can't find him. He's intelligent, cunning, and thorough, and it shows in his reporting. He most assuredly can keep secrets, one of them added to the approving nods of others. Again, look how no one can flush him out, despite the Ministry's and Dumbledore's best efforts. We have given him a good deal more information than he has used.
Yet.
True, but you will note how carefully he chooses the information he does use, Croaker agreed. There is an agent at Hogwarts? There is, and even he can't spot who Mr. Twist is. Although he does have some suspicions, he reported that he needs firm evidence first before saying anything. I would like to know how the editors are getting letters to and from Twist, another said. All postal drop within Gringotts, came the reply. No, I don't believe he would send any sensitive mail by owl. Too easy to intercept. An older woman muttered. What does our contact in Hogwarts say? Well, it is the only private way available for a student to send mail. But how is he getting his mail? According to our agent, Albus has the Ollery watched, and even he, according to all reports, is stumped on how it is done. Is it certain that Twist is a student?
Yes.
The way the articles are worded shows it to be a young person writing and not an adult. Plus, look how he keeps coming back to problems within the school. An adult would have more concern for adult issues and pay less attention to school-related matters. Speaking of Hogwarts, we need to get Potter in to hear the prophecies soon. There is time, Croaker said. Dumbledore is playing his cards too closely to get Potter away just now. He's got the boy locked down tighter than a Gringotts vault. Maybe when Hogwarts breaks for the Christmas holidays. We will see. Vernon Dursley groaned as he read the initial reports from the auditors. How could things go wrong so fast? As it stands, he's looking at repaying back about £250,000, selling his stock portfolio, and maybe even facing a term in prison. To Mr. Vernon Dursley. The final audit report should be completed by mid-December. It has been noted that you have been receiving benefits for a minor child, Harry James Potter, since the deaths of his parents in 1981. All records and receipts for said child's care will be handed over by the end of December. If any irregularities are found, you will be repaying all funds not spent for the welfare and care of said minor, plus interest, and possible criminal action will be discussed then. Due to these factors, copies of this report are being sent to Inland Revenue and Grunning's legal retainer. Ragnarok, Director of Gringotts Bank.
CC.
Lord Peter Flinchley Adams. Inland Revenue. Ragnarok cackled as he read the latest reports on the Wisengamot. The fools. They are only cutting their own throats if they anger the crown. Overlord. A small goblin broke into Ragnar's musing. The keeper is here to see you again. Do not keep her waiting, youngling. Show her in. Ragnar snapped impatiently. The small goblin ducked back with a squeak, holding the door respectfully for the robed and hooded figure that swept regally into the room. Ragnar rose, bowing courteously, gesturing for the figure to be seated. Greetings unto you, Overlord, she said, lowering her hood. The door shut silently behind. The figure, as she, for it was indeed an elderly female goblin, sat in the chair before Ragnar's desk. I have examined the papers and memories you have sent, and I agree. It would be to our advantage to help this wizarding youngling. Ragnar nodded his head as he returned to his chair, acknowledging her decision. It is good to know that I have chosen wisely, Mistress of Knowledge, his deep, gravely voice murmured. He has many trials before him. What can you tell me of any aid we may give? There are many ways open to us, her calm, soft voice replied. The darkness within him, the peace of soul, the dark one planted, it must be removed. Soul? He carries a piece of the dark one's soul within him? Can it be done without harming the boy? Ragnar gasped in shock. It will take a very ancient ritual, but it can be done. She nodded as she spoke. But that is not the original purpose of this ritual, she continued calmly. What then? I viewed the memories the boy gave you about the return of this self-styled Voldemort. I believe the ritual of renunciation, when used with 2 others, will solve many of his problems. And then, she continued, there is the matter of the claim of, her soft words droned on, leaving Ragnar in a daze. He shuddered at her words. What in the 7 hells had he gotten himself into this time? With a final shiver, he looked into her strange, sightless eyes and listened intently. 23. Plans go awry. Harry smirked as he read the letter from Lord Peter. 2 meetings were scheduled after the leaving feast. The first was a secret meeting between Lord Peter and himself to go over everything. The second was to meet with the review board, which consisted of Madam Bones and Wizarding Child Services, to decide if enough proof had been gathered for Harry's emancipation. Sirius was supposed to escort Harry to Gringotts, where the meeting with the review board was to take place. As far as anyone knew, Albus Dumbledore wasn't invited. Lord Peter had the old wizard's guardianship quietly revoked, so the headmaster's presence wasn't necessary. The notice informing Dumbledore of that fact had been accidentally delayed. By the time that he found out, it would be too late to stop the proceedings. As they left the defense classroom, Harry was called back by Hermione. Harry, are you sure it'll be all right for you to go home with Sirius? She asked with some concern. Sure, why not? Harry asked. They had somewhat restored their friendship, but it had been slow going. Sirius has been cleared of all wrongdoing, and he wants to spend Christmas with me. What's so hard to understand? Students passed by on their way to the next class. Hermione sighed and shook her head. But Dumbledore doesn't have a say in this, Hermione. He isn't my guardian, but you usually stay here for the holidays, she tried to reason with him. True, but you get to spend the halls with your family. Harry looked over at his friend. Why can't I spend it with my godfathers? Of course, but nothing, Hermione. This is my first Christmas to have with someone that's family, and the Dursleys don't count. They've never wanted me or considered me family, Harry growled. I'll be fine, Hermione. Don't worry. Mr. Potter, came Professor McGonagall's voice as he was leaving the common room to head for dinner in the Great Hall. Yes, Professor? Harry asked, turning to face her. I see that you didn't sign up to stay for the holidays this year.
No, ma'am.
Sirius wants me to stay with him, and I'm going to. He's got everything planned out for us, the teen replied in a wistful voice. Do you think that's wise? After all, he isn't your guardian, but he's my godfather. Professor? Harry asked, looking up at her. Yes, Mr. Potter? Why is everyone suddenly so concerned about where I spend the holidays? No one ever was before. Don't you want me to spend them with the only family I have left? Everyone tells me that Sirius Place is very secure. Very well, Mr. Potter. Harry was ready to scream. It was leaving feast for the start of the Christmas halls. It seemed that Dumbledore was against him leaving Hogwarts. He went as far as inviting Sirius and Remus to spend it here. He cited the possible danger Harry would be in away from the safety of the castle. Sirius tried to refuse, but Dumbledore was adamant about keeping Harry where he could keep an eye on him. Looks like it'll be Plan B, Harry thought with disgust. He wrote to Lord Peter about the change in plans and requested a timed portkey. There was no way Harry was going to miss his meetings. Sirius would just have to fend for himself. Harry wondered if his godfather had told Dumbledore what was going on. If anything, the old marauder thought it was one massive prank to pull on the old headmaster. That night Harry received a note and an old Coke can from Lord Peter from Dobby. Harry was sure he wouldn't have gotten this far without the little elf's help. Lord Harry, it does not surprise me that the headmaster is trying to thwart you. He does, however, suspect something. He does, after all, have friends in the ministry and they have been nosing around, asking questions. Be careful. The portkey will go off at 9 a.m. tomorrow for us to discuss your briefing. Don't lose it. PFA. The next morning, Harry was up and dressed alone in his dorm, well before 8 a.m. The portkey went off as scheduled and Harry landed in Lord Peter's office. Breakfast was waiting. Did anyone see you leave, Lord Harry? Asked Lord Peter. Harry smiled, dusting himself off. Since I am the only one staying in the dorm at the moment and Sirius and Remus aren't expected to arrive until sometime this afternoon, no sir. Very well, help yourself to breakfast, as we go over everything for the meeting tomorrow. You know, they'll start looking for me when I don't show up for lunch, don't you? Harry commented as he poured himself a cup of tea. You will be back in plenty of time, and I have confidence in your skills of distraction. Lord Peter smiled. The rest of the morning they went over everything in Harry's file, from the sealing of his parents' will to the abuse done by the Dursleys, to the accidental emancipation by both legal authorities in the wizarding world. Do you think it'll work? Lord Peter smiled. I don't see why not. Relax, Lord Harry. Between you and Oliver, you have kept this world totally off balance. Something as minor as your emancipation should slip past unnoticed. I salute you for your artful misdirection. Harry raised his cup in mock salute before sipping. True to Lord Peter's prediction, no one questioned Harry when he came down for lunch an hour later. Sirius and Remus arrived just before dinner that night. Sirius was very apologetic about the change of plans, but Harry brushed it off. It's all right, Padfoot, Harry said as they walked to the Great Hall for dinner. We all know that what Dumbledore wants, Dumbledore gets. Sirius cringed as Remus snorted. We need to talk after dinner, Cub, Remus said quietly. All right, Harry said. What about? After dinner, was the terse reply. Dinner that night was chaotic as only two marauders could make it. Stories about the past, as well as a couple of pranks, kept the table in an uproar. Severus Snape, sporting a mohawk and neon pink robes, was a hit to everyone but the potions master. Harry didn't say much as he picked at his food. He wondered just what his godfather and Moony wanted to talk about later. He also didn't like the fact that everyone thought it was all right for the two to torment Snape. Granted, Harry didn't like the man, but still. So, what did you want to talk to me about? Harry asked, making himself comfortable on the sofa in the guest quarters. So this meeting tomorrow, Remus asked. Why isn't Dumbledore invited? He is, after all, your guardian. Harry straightened, turning to Sirius.
He knows.
Moony overheard me talking to Gringotts, Sirius reassured Harry, glaring at Remus. Moony here wanted to tell Dumbledore, but I talked him out of it. Harry sighed with relief. I guess Dumbledore's notice got lost in the mail, or something. Cub, Gringotts doesn't lose mail, Remus chided. Right, like they didn't lose my bank statements that I never got? Or the fact that the notice that I was entitled to have my parents' will read when I was 11 was lost? Or the notification assigning Dumbledore as my supposed magical guardian got lost? Remus reared back in surprise. No, Moony, Harry sighed. Albus Dumbledore has been keeping my rights and heritage from me. So, it was decided to accidentally lose his notice until tomorrow when the meeting starts. Don't misunderstand. He isn't my legal guardian, magical or otherwise. He never was, and after tomorrow, Never will be. Remus looked from Harry to Sirius and nodded his head. Harry walked casually into the Great Hall for breakfast the next morning. Hopefully, by the end of the day, he would be free of Dumbledore's meddling. The old coot would have better things to occupy his time. Since there were only a few people staying at the castle over the holidays, only one large table was set up. Many of the places were yet to be filled. Some were reading the Daily Prophet, and some were reading the Quibbler. Since the whole tampering with British rule fiasco, the Rags had been doing their best to give their readers a bit of a history lesson. Harry had been pleased to note that many of the purebloods hadn't been too happy with current events. Many thought that Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II, wielded no power over the magical community. That was until the Quibbler and the Prophet started to post some of the more archaic treaties in full unedited detail, including the 1692 Statute of Secrecy. The newspapers pointed out that these were magically enforceable contracts. Even if one hadn't signed it personally, the whole community was bound to it through the signatures of the family heads of that time period. If they directly opposed the crown, the wizarding world would lose not only their autonomy, but also their magic. An owl dropped his copy of the Quibbler beside him as Harry filled his plate. Truth or fiction? The other day, I was listening to the Golden Trio as they came out of defense class. They were arguing that it wasn't safe for Potter to leave the castle for the holidays. I happened to overhear them as they were discussing He Who Must Not Be Named, but Potter insisted on calling him Lord V********. I think I will too, as it's easier on the hand to write. Yes, surprisingly, Potter was saying the Dark Lord's name. I heard Potter mention in passing that the Dark Lord wasn't even a pureblood. This got me wondering. I was curious at some of the other comments I overheard him make in the past, so I went and tried to look up any information on you-know-who in the school library. Hogwarts library is amazing. There are books about everything and anything here. About the only thing you can't find is a good action thriller to sit down and enjoy when you aren't busy working on homework. Or any information about the man who currently holds our world in fear, the so-called Dark Lord. Anyway, I digress. Potter likes to call the him Lord V*******, or Riddle, somewhat interchangeably. The Golden Boy refuses to say He Who Must Not Be Named or any other silly aliases. That got me to wondering. Now, Riddle didn't sound like a wizarding family name I'd heard before, so I did some checking. I found a Tom Marvolo Riddle was sorted into the House of Slytherin and later made head boy in 1943. He was a half-blood, according to the few scant records I found at school. With so many questions in mind, I paid a visit to the Goblins, where for a small fee, I was allowed to research their self-updating heritage books. Guess what I found? I started out with the line of Slytherin, for we all know Lord V****** professes to be the last of that line. Well, according to the records, he's lying. A man named Tom Marvolo Riddle was the last of that line, but he died on October 31st, 1981. He was the son of Mary P. Gaunt, last of the pureblood line of Slytherin, and Tom Riddle, a local Muggle aristocrat. The heritage book clearly shows there is no direct blood heir to Salazar Slytherin now living. So, where does that leave Lord V******? Perhaps he suffers from wishful thinking. The heritage books are bloodbound and have never made a mistake in the 1,000 years they have existed. All I know is that his loyal followers are following a dream, or a nightmare. The direct bloodline of the ancient and noble house of Slytherin is no more. I know these statements can get one killed, but seriously, why isn't anyone questioning what they are told? Why are we giving power to someone that doesn't even like to use his real name? Lord V****** can't be his real name. After all, Lord V******'s claim to Slytherin's blood is false. Perhaps the Ministry's claim he is gone is false as well, personally, with their record. Potter claims otherwise. So who is right and who is wrong? And even more importantly, can we afford to be wrong? Could Potter have been right all along, and no one wanted to believe? Oh, by the way, this is my last article until after the holidays. Happy Christmas. Oliver Twist. 24. A precedent is set. Since Oliver's post came out that morning, the headmaster had been fielding questions about Tom, how Oliver got hold of that information, and why it hadn't been made known before. Harry was grilled for about an hour in Dumbledore's office. Then their attention was turned elsewhere. Yes, he and his friends had never been that quiet about discussing Tom and his merry band of miscreants. Harry repeatedly, and in public areas of Hogwarts, told anyone who would listen his views on the upcoming war. After all, since he had been labeled by the Ministry as an attention-seeking prat, why not use it? Most had, over time, shrugged Harry's comments off. Since he had plans with Sirius and Remus that afternoon, Harry was able to sneak away from the order meeting before Molly could issue an invitation to the burrow. He was able to plead the need to use the library to get a start on his homework. The order members remained in the headmaster's office rehashing over the articles and the identity of Oliver Twist, not realizing that he'd just left the office. Unknown to all, Dobby had, once more, placed Harry's little Walkman under Dumbledore's desk. Harry needed to know if they were onto him yet. He had dropped a few clues in his articles and was surprised that no one other than Professor Flitwick had caught on yet. Or maybe they had, and decided that they just didn't believe it? Harry went up to the boys' dorm, not to retrieve his book bag, but to grab the dress robes that Dobby had purchased for him earlier in the school year. Lord Peter had extended an invitation for Harry to change in his office if he couldn't get away in time. Both knew that by dropping the bomb on Lord Voldemort's identity, Harry would open speculations that he was Oliver. However, if he had done things right, he would dismissed as usual. Only time would tell. Harry only hoped the information on the heritage books available at Gringotts would prove enough of a false trail to turn suspicion away from him. He did have an ally in Professor Flitwick who had proofread Harry's articles and added a few details that he had managed to overlook. With the professor's help, they didn't look like one of Harry's essays. Lord Peter was waiting for him in his office. A quick change, and the sloppy-looking Gryffindor, Harry Potter, became Lord Harry James Potter. The dress robe had been tailored to Lord Peter's specifications with the Potter and Gryffindor crests on them. By the end of the day, Harry would no longer be just an heir, but lord and head of two houses. The meeting would take place not in the Ministry, as originally planned, but in Gringotts' inheritance office. Both Healer Atwaters and Lord Peter conferred with Gringotts and decided it would be safer in the long run to have the meeting at the bank. Goblin neutrality would be a huge asset in this case. Wizarding Services and Madame Bones, once brought up to speed on the facts, agreed with the choice of venue. Harry wondered if Sirius and Remus would show. Last he knew, Sirius was shouting insults at Snape while Remus refereed in the headmaster's office. Not the ideal image of a guardian in Harry's opinion. He was still looking forward to Christmas Day together. They had plans of spending it away from Hogwarts in Grimmauld Place as a family. That is, if after this meeting, Sirius would still want to be with Harry. Time alone would tell. Lord Peter and Harry were ushered into a posh conference room containing a marble table with gold and semi-precious inlaid designs. The chairs were covered with deep maroon velvet and were very comfortable. Madame Bones and another woman sat side by side across from Harry and Lord Peter. Sirius and Remus had yet to arrive. A goblin came in along with Healer Atwaters. "It is 1 p.m. Time to start. Are we all present?" asked the goblin. "No, sir. Sirius Black, head of the ancient and noble house of Black, hasn't arrived. We will give him 10 minutes, then we will start without him," said the goblin, sitting at the head of the table, facing both parties. Harry sighed and tried not to let the hurt show. He had been willing to give Sirius a chance, but once again, the man was putting others ahead of his responsibilities as his godfather. Lord Peter reached for Harry's hand and gave it a squeeze. At least here was someone that had been there for him for the past 6 months. The man had slowly worked his way into Harry's life and proved that he could put Harry first. Harry needed that. Just before the 10 minutes were up, Sirius rushed in along with Remus, Molly and Arthur Weasley, and of course, Albus Dumbledore. Amelia Bones stood up. "I understand why Sirius Black is here, but not you four." Sirius sat down beside Harry and whispered, "Sorry, pup. They weren't going to let me leave the order meeting unless I told them why." Harry scowled as the headmaster and the Weasleys sat across from him next to Madame Bones. Well, so much for quiet hearing. Molly's screeching alone would see to that. "We are here to ask for custody of Harry Potter," Molly Weasley said, triumphantly. "I'm afraid, Mrs. Weasley, we don't have any paperwork requesting your guardianship. Besides, this isn't a custody hearing," replied the witch with the Wizarding Child Services crest on her robes. "But an emancipation hearing? Sirius, you told me it was a guardianship hearing," Molly accused. "You can't mean this. I won't allow it," Albus Dumbledore roared, his blue eyes flashing. "You, sir, have no say in this matter," Lord Peter stood. "By your own admission, you declared Lord Harry James Potter a legal adult at age 14. "I most certainly did not. And pray tell, just who are you?" Lord Peter smiled as he pulled out a file. "I have in my hands a copy of the contract that you witnessed and signed, forcing Lord Harry James Potter to participate in the Triwizard Tournament, against his will, this past school year. A contract that clearly states that the participants must be 17 years of age. By approving this contract, you as headmaster of Hogwarts, chief warlock of the Wizengamot and supreme mugwump of the IWC, declared that the minor, Harry James Potter, was a legal adult. You and the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge, by also allowing said minor to be tried in an adult venue as an adult for an underage magical offense, did therefore, knowingly and willfully, declared Lord Harry James Potter an adult. Sir, you cannot have it both ways. You set a magical legal precedent. Madam Bones, I yield to your ruling." "I object," Albus Dumbledore shouted, coming to his feet once more. "You can't do this," Molly Weasley screeched, as Arthur placed a hand on her shoulder to keep her from lunging forward. "I object also," Sirius said from beside Harry. "Harry, don't you want me as your guardians?" Remus placed his head into his hands. "I warned you, Siri. James and Lily must hate us for failing Harry." Before Harry could say anything, Madam Bones cleared her throat. "I have looked over the case for emancipation of Harry James Potter, heir by blood to the noble and ancient houses of Potter and Gryffindor. I find several things in this file to be very chilling." She cleared her throat. "Molly and Arthur, you may leave. This is not about you. You have never petitioned for guardianship in the past, and I fail to see why you do so now. However, this is not a guardianship hearing but an emancipation hearing. You were not requested to attend. Please leave now." Molly huffed. "Now see here." "Molly, please let's go," Arthur said, pulling Molly away. "But Harry..." Harry looked up at the woman who wanted only to mother him and gave her a slight smile. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Weasley, but it has to be this way." "Harry," she sniffed, as Arthur pulled her from the room. Over his shoulder, he said, "You are always welcomed at the Burrow Sun. We still consider you one of us." "Thank you, Mr. Weasley." Madam Bones waited until the door closed before starting in. "As I said, I found several disturbing things about this case. 1. The way the Potter will was ignored by someone." She paused, looking at Albus Dumbledore, who swore an oath to uphold the law of the wizarding world. A low growl started in the room until Harry elbowed Sirius. 2. She cleared her throat. The same person forcibly obtained guardianship of the Potter heir, once more defying the explicit wishes of the Potter's will. 3. Her glare intensified. The aforementioned person failed his duty as guardian as required by law in that he failed to check on the well-being of his ward and further, failed to teach said ward the customs and duties his heritage dictates, leaving him woefully ignorant of our world. "Do you see a pattern here, Albus?" she sniped. Albus squirmed in his chair. It was all for the greater good. The child needed the blood protection that living with his only blood relative could provide. "I knew it wouldn't be a happy life, but the child would still be alive." Harry snorted. Lord Peter placed a hand on his arm, giving Harry a look. Madam Bones snarled. "You usurped the rights of the child and ignored his parents' last wishes. You further ignored the laws regarding minor magical children. You sealed the will, and with the help of someone in the ministry, you kept the WCS from fulfilling their duties. It is a wonder you still have your magic, Albus Dumbledore." "I only suggested," Albus started to explain. "And there is the rub," Lord Peter interjected. "Madam, if I may, could you read Healer Atwater's report to us?" Madam Bones read aloud the report as Lord Peter requested. As each sentence echoed in the silent office, Albus Dumbledore's face paled. Sirius groaned and buried his face into his hands. Remus snarled. Harry remained still as a statue, staring mutely off into the distance as a single tear slid down his pale cheek. If this is your idea of not a happy life, spare me your idea of a cruel one, Lord Peter said. I have been in correspondence with Lord Harry since last spring. How we have been doing so is not up for discussion, Lord Peter stated, stalling the headmaster's questions. I have been doing what you and Lord Black have failed to do. That is, to teach Lord Harry what it means to be the head of an ancient and noble house. I also will be requesting, if this meeting is successful, that Lord Potter take his seats on the Wizengamot as a full adult. You can't do that, Albus exclaimed, spittle flying. He is not ready. He doesn't understand the politics involved. And whose fault is that? Lord Peter countered in disgust. Madame Bones sighed and looked at the witch beside her, who gave her a slight nod. I, Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, do hereby recognize Lord Harry James Potter, head of the ancient and noble houses of Potter and Gryffindor, as a full and legal adult with all of the duties and responsibilities entailed. I also do declare that until Lord Potter reaches the age of 17, he is to have the following advisors: Lord Peter Finchley Adams and the goblin known as Ragnarok, should Lord Potter need sage advice. So mote be.
No.
Stop. I protest, Albus said, pulling out his wand, standing as a glow of magic shot from Amelia Bones to Harry. The witch from WCS stood up. I, Greta Marchbank, head of the Wizarding Children's Services, do hereby recognize Harry James Potter, head of the ancient and noble houses of Potter and Gryffindor, as a full and legal adult with all of the duties and responsibilities entailed. I also do declare that until Lord Potter reaches the age of 17, he is to have the following advisors: Lord Peter Finchley Adams and the goblin known as Ragnarok, should Lord Potter need sage advice. So mote be. Magic entwined around Harry as he stood straight. He noted the disapproval and anger in the headmaster's eyes and shook his head. You have never been there for me, headmaster. Where were you when I was locked in a boot cupboard, crying from hunger? Where were you when my cousin and his gang invented the game, Harry hunting? Where were you when I was forced to compete in the Triwizard Tournament? And lastly, why should I trust you now? Harry turned to his godfather. I'm sorry, Sirius, but I had to do it this way. Then, in a small childlike whisper, do you still want me? Sirius looked up with tears running down his cheeks. He grabbed Harry into a fierce hug. I know I wasn't there for you, Harry, but yes, I still want you. Harry and Sirius were only vaguely aware when Remus' arms surrounded them both. 25. The sound of goblin laughter. Harry left the meeting with Lord Peter, Sirius, and Remus. When they stepped out the door, Arthur and Molly were waiting for them. Harry is emancipated, Sirius said with a sad look in his eyes. Emancipated? Molly screeched. Of all the idiotic ideas. Harry James Potter. You aren't old enough to make adult decisions. You're just a child. Harry sighed as he sidestepped Molly's move to smother him in an embrace. I'm sorry, Mrs. Weasley, but the Ministry and Professor Dumbledore don't agree with you. What do you mean, Harry? Arthur asked as he tried in vain to calm his hysterical wife. Harry shrugged. I don't know all the legal terms, but last year both the Ministry and Professor Dumbledore agreed that I was adult enough to participate in the Triwizard Tournament and old enough to be tried as an adult for underage magic. Therefore, I must be an adult, right, sirs? Harry looked up at Lord Peter. That is correct, Lord Potter, the barrister smiled. Come this way, please. There are papers that need to be signed. The goblins should have your family rings ready. Lord Peter ushered his three companions ahead of him with a slight bow, leaving the Weasleys trailing in their wake. Harry's? Sirius was heard to query fretfully, what else do we need to do here? Remus just pushed him in the direction indicated as the four men walked down another hallway. Come along, Sirius, Harry said with a patient smile. I'll explain things to you. He sighed in frustration as Molly dragged Arthur along behind them. Harry, my boy, a commanding voice grated. Oh, Merlin, let's get out of here, Harry groaned as the headmaster bore down on everyone. Go, Harry, Remus said. I'll keep him busy, but you owe me. Lord Peter, Harry with Sirius, and the Weasleys following slipped into Ragnarok's office. Molly was still huffing about how Harry shouldn't have to deal with adult affairs. In her opinion, he was way too young. After everyone was comfortably seated in Director Ragnarok's office, the goblin pulled out 2 antique wooden boxes. I have your rings, Lord Potter. Here is the Potter Lordship ring, he said, holding out one of the carved boxes. And the Gryffindor ring. Go ahead and put them on one at a time. Wait until the first adjusts to your finger, then put on the other. Harry, think about what you are doing. Molly beseeched. Madam, you are here as a courtesy. Please remain quiet, Ragnarok said, harshly. My wife meant no disrespect, sir, Arthur said, placing a hand on her shoulder to keep her quiet. Harry placed each ring on one at a time, allowing the rings to magically mold themselves to his finger. The family magics accepted Harry as their own. As one, they in the room stood and bowed, just as Remus walked in along with Albus Dumbledore. Sorry, I'm late, but the headmaster couldn't take no for an answer. Again, Remus shrugged, stepping up to Harry. I see the rings accepted you, Harry. Welcome, Lord Potter Gryffindor. Harry, my boy, Albus Dumbledore said, with his grandfatherly disappointed frown. Do you know what you have done? Yes, sir, I do, Harry said. And it's Lord Potter to you from now on. I took the first steps away from your careless neglect. You are not God, headmaster. You don't know everything. Harry, that's no way to speak to the headmaster, Molly chided. Turning to Lord Peter, and ignoring Molly, Harry said, Let's go, sir. I am done here for now. Thank you, Ragnarok. Harry gave the goblin a slight bow. Wait for me, Sirius said, jumping in, taking hold of Harry's robe. Wait, Albus said, reaching out only to be blocked by Remus as the portkey activated before anyone else could grab hold of Harry. The 3 landed in Lord Peter's office. Sirius, after getting his laughter under control, said, All right, Harry, spill. I think I've been patient enough. Have a seat, Lord Black, Lord Peter offered. Lord Harry and I have quite a tale to tell you. First order of business, Harry said, pulling out a Walkman. Sirius, you need to hear this. This was recorded a few days before the leaving feast when everyone was so concerned about where I was going to spend the Christmas halls. Remember, Dumbledore sometime last fall mentioned closing the school to upgrade the wards. Well, just listen. Albus, came McGonagall's voice from the Walkman. Come in, my dear. The sounds of someone sitting and tea pouring were in the background as the two talked. So, has Harry mentioned where he was going for this holiday with the school closing? Albus asked casually. Sirius has invited him to spend the holiday with him. He can't. Harry must return to his relatives. He will be safer there. I'm afraid Albus, since Sirius is his godfather, he has every right to host him for the halls. I fear that Mr. Black just isn't stable enough yet to handle Harry's safety. No, Harry must go to the Dursleys. Minerva sighed. I'm afraid you have no say in this, Albus. Besides, with the ward updating, he can't stay here. Sirius will do what he is told, Albus stated firmly. However, I will just reschedule the wards. Harry cannot be allowed to go with someone as unstable as Mr. Black. The sound of someone choking on their tea was clearly heard. Albus, you can't be serious. We need those wards adjusted. You can't sacrifice the safety of all our students for the sake of one. It is for the greater good, my dear. Sirius started to growl. Harry sighed as he shut off the Walkman. I'm sorry, Sirius, but as you heard, he's willing to sacrifice everyone, even you, to control me. What the hell more has he done to you and me? Sirius snarled. Harry put the Walkman away as Lord Peter called for tea and sandwiches to be served. Harry began his tale. He and Lord Peter had discussed how much they were going to tell Sirius and had come to the conclusion that they didn't want Sirius to know all his secrets just yet. There were some things that he really didn't trust his godfather with, such as Harry's identity as Oliver Twist. That must remain a secret for now. Although Harry was sure the old marauder would enjoy the irony. However, he was able to tell Sirius how he got around Dumbledore's little information blackout by using Dobby and the little magically charmed Walkman. He also told him how he found out, through the goblins, that Lord Peter had been the Potter's family barrister for decades, and things snowballed from there. "But why didn't you trust me with all this?" Sirius asked, a little heartbroken. Harry sighed, running his hand through his hair and shaking his head. "Sirius, I love you, but you weren't there when I needed you. You and Remus are the last links to my parents, but you have never put me first. How could I trust you? Dumbledore keeps you close to heel, and you have the tendency to blab to him about things better left unsaid. Like today, you should have just told him your business was personal and left. I just couldn't a chance." Sirius hung his head. "When your parents died, I tried to get to you, but Hagrid had orders and wouldn't let me have you. I never dreamed he would take you to Petunia. I went crazy. Instead of staying with you, I went after the rat. I am so sorry." Harry hugged the man. "Sirius, I could forgive you that. You weren't thinking clearly, but after you escaped you still didn't put me first." Sirius jerked back. Never say that," he snarled. Then the fight went out of him as he continued. "But you're right. I haven't been a good godfather." Harry hung his head, with tears in his eyes. "And you always allow Dumbledore to control me. He snaps his fingers and you jump to do his bidding. Just like he did this Christmas. What happened to our plans of a family Christmas?" Sirius opened his mouth, then closed it. Closing his eyes, he sighed and gave a nod. "Lord Harry," Lord Peter interjected, breaking the tension. "Director Ragnarok has requested that you and I return to Gringotts this afternoon for another meeting." Amelia Bones was enjoying a bit of brandy with Greta Marchbanks. Both witches were celebrating putting one over on the old windbag. "Here's to a successful maneuver," Greta said, holding up her brandy. "Here's to getting one over on the old fart," Amelia said, holding up her glass. A moment of silence fell as Amelia looked over the Potter files. "I just can't believe Albus bungled one of his plans this badly. Let's face it, Amelia. The man is getting senile." Neither witch noticed a small beetle slipping out under the crack in the door. She had her scoop. It wasn't the one she wanted, but it'll do for now. "The child is coming today, then?" the cloaked and hooded goblin female queried softly. "Yes, wise one. He is due at any moment," Ragnarok answered in a respectful manner.
"Good.
I will explain to him the simple ritual words he must speak." She was silent then, seeming to withdraw into her thoughts. Ragnarok stood, and with a deep bow, he left the room. "Lord Harry, now that you are a free adult, I have someone I need you to speak with," Ragnarok asked, ushering the young lord and his barrister deeper into the halls of Gringotts. "Director Ragnarok, is this necessary?" Lord Peter sighed. "Harry's time is limited, and we had thought to celebrate a bit. You may have even more reason to celebrate if you will follow me. This goblin has followed our investigation with great interest. This is one of high prestige, and to deny her request would bring great insult to the clans." The goblin leader's feral grin told them he had been up to something. Ragnarok led them to a pair of high doors with a squad of heavily armed goblins standing guard. Both wizards paused as Ragnarok shouted something in gobbledygook. Jumping to attention, the guards moved away from the doors, allowing the trio to enter. Their footsteps echoed off the stone walls. The only light came from torches lining the walls of the room before them. They saw a small cloaked figure sitting in a chair on a slightly raised dais. Ragnarok bowed deeply and addressed the figure with the utmost respect. Confused and a bit overwhelmed, Lord Peter and Harry decided that it would be prudent to follow his example and bow. "Lord Harry Potter Gryffindor, Lord Peter Fletchley Adams, it is my honor to present you to the Goblin Nation's Keeper of Knowledge," Ragnarok said solemnly. The pride and awe in his raspy voice told them that this small being was to be treated with absolute respect. "She has come to aid you with knowledge long forgotten by wizard kind. Lady, I welcome any aid that is offered to help me in my quest against Voldemort," Harry said as he came up from his bow. Confusion clearly etched in his young green eyes. "Well said, wizard child," the hooded figure chuckled softly. "Your need is great. Director Ragnarok has told me much about you and what it is you face. I was also told that you carry within you a piece of Voldemort's soul from his first life. Is this true?" Harry looked at Lord Peter in confusion. Huh. Yes, my lady. Lord Peter looked at Harry with an apologetic nod. He does indeed carry such a piece, but we had waited to tell him of it until he was free to decide for himself what he wished to do about it. As you know, it will be quite dangerous to remove it. The keeper nodded. Yes, normally it would be so, but there are ways it can be done with far less danger. Concern colored her voice as she continued. Wizards have all but forgotten the ritual of renunciation. It is much more all-encompassing than the simple disowning ritual used by them today. She paused briefly, as if contemplating, then continued. I saw the memory given of the ritual used to bring the evil one back. He was a fool to use it. Bone of the father, flesh of the servant, blood of the enemy, the absolute fool. She huffed in scorn. Do you realize the bone he used was a muggle's? Where is the magic in a muggle? She snorted in disgust. Do you realize the wizard who gave his flesh was not the servant spoken of in the old magic? The servant required of this ritual is a house elf, for they are magic. They have no core like a wizard. In order to create a core in a resurrected wizard, the magic must come from a being of magic. A sharp gasp of intake air echoed as Harry stiffened in dawning realization of what she was saying. And as for your blood, when he used it in his fouled ritual, he in effect committed the worst offense against the old magic, she snorted in disgust. Line theft, and against the head of ancient and noble houses, no less. I tell you now, the old magic is not pleased. Harry's face paled as he started to tremble. The flickering flames that dotted the room flared wildly around them. Lord Peter placed a hand on the lad's shoulder to calm him. You, Harry James Potter, she spoke with authority, must now reclaim the family magics he stole from you. She stood, lowering her hood, her aged goblin face made harsh by the flickering torchlight. This would include the line of Slytherin. A line granted you by magic itself through the right of conquest, for you have indeed defeated him several times. Her sightless eyes held them in thrall as she pointed a bony finger at Harry and demanded, claim the magic and the ring of the Slytherin. Take your place as the last of that magical line. You are not the blood heir, but his magical heir by right of conquest. You are the last of that line, and all Slytherin magic, past, present, and future, is yours to keep, to use, to bequeath, to deny, and to undo, as you see fit. The silence was total until Ragnarok's deep, booming laughter filled the room. 26. Do notice. Albus sat alone in his office at Hogwarts, staring at his cup of tea. Where had he gone so wrong? In front of him was a copy of Harry's files and brief for the meeting that had happened early that day. It was all there in front of him, every bit of information that he had somehow missed. He was supposed to uphold the laws he had helped create in the wizarding world. Instead, he was now the victim of those very same laws. He never dreamed that forcing Harry to do the tournament, he was basically saying, yes, Harry, you are old enough to know what's going on, old enough to make your own decisions. By competing, you, my boy, are an adult. Then Cornelius' ploy at trying to discredit Harry in that trial, trying in him front of the full Wisengamot as an adult. What was Cornelius thinking? Albus had been suspicious that Harry was up to something, he just couldn't figure out what. The boy never received any mail, as that owl of his was too noticeable. How did the boy do it? The wards really needed to be fine-tuned, but since Harry now refused to go back to his relatives, he could not clear the school. His only option was to force Harry to remain at Hogwarts. It wasn't safe for the boy outside of the school, and Sirius Black wasn't responsible enough to keep a 15-year-old boy in check. Merlin, Sirius had never grown up himself, what with his stint in Azkaban. How could he be a proper guardian for a teenager when he needed a guardian himself? No, Harry was now lost to him. He would never regain the trust the lad once had in him. Or had he ever had it? Included in the file was a mind healer's report. Severus had a lot to answer for. How could he have missed this? How did Harry submit to a healer? He never left the school that Albus knew of. Later that afternoon, Minerva and Poppy were sitting in the infirmary office, sharing their usual afternoon tea. So far the conversation had focused on the events leading up to Harry's emancipation. Poppy's? Minerva queried as her old friend refreshed their cups. Have you noticed anything unusual about Albus of late? If you mean other than his normal meddling? No, Minerva replied. I was referring to his rather frightening obsession with Harry Potter. She sighed. I know he has always taken an unusually strong interest in young Harry's life. I'm afraid the stress of being on constant watch for so many years is, well... She stirred her tea slowly, lost in thought for a bit. Poppy watched her friend as she sipped from her own cup. Are you asking me if Albus is losing his ability to make rational decisions, Min? There was a pause as Minerva collected her thoughts. Yes, Poppy, I am. Lately, he has become more and more adamant that he have total control over Mr. Potter's life. Minerva hesitated, and then continued. He has gone so far as to tell me that the wards will not be retuned because Mr. Potter must stay at Hogwarts if he is not going to be at his relatives'. He used the argument that staying with Sirius was too dangerous. This even after Harry won his Emancipation. Albus is at this moment holed up in his office looking for a way to regain control of the boy. Minerva looked up at her old friend, tears shining in her eyes. I'm afraid, Poppy. Afraid his mind is buckling with the strain, and there is nothing I can do to help him. Poppy leaned forward, placing a hand on her old friend's arm. Don't fret, Min. I'll see to it he comes in for a mandatory physical this week. While he's in here, I'll be sure to check for stress and mental acumen as well. Minerva gave her a watery smile. Thank you, Poppy. I'll be sending you the necessary paperwork, so you can release your results if you find anything amiss. A weary Harry returned to Grimmauld Place after his meeting with the Goblin Keeper. The Keeper had informed them the best time to do the ritual would be during the dark of the moon after the New Year. Harry and Sirius, after due consideration, decided to have their Christmas fun in spite of Dumbledore. They made hurried plans for fun, sun, and half-naked girls on some white sand beach. The bags were quickly packed and ready. Harry no longer needed anyone's permission, but he did let Lord Peter and Ragnarok know where he would be, in case of an emergency. Their port key was timed, and just as it activated to whisk them away, the fireplace in the parlor went green. Sirius? Hello? Harry? Anyone called Remus. You need to get to Hogwarts for an emergency order meeting. Hello. Rita Skeeter was in seventh heaven. She had followed Harry Potter to a meeting where he was emancipated, and the files she'd managed to get a quick look at. She had the story of a lifetime. Child abuse, neglect, recognized as an adult by a senile Albus Dumbledore and a bumbling Cornelius Fudge. It was the stuff of dreams. And that fool Dumbledore never suspected he carried his undoing in his very own pocket. His magic had masked her presence quite well. She quickly wrote out her article. The minister was at first reluctant to print anything that portrayed him in a bad light. However, when she pointed out that he had believed Dumbledore when he said the boy was fine at his relatives, and the fact that Headmaster had also stepped aside and let him try the boy, thereby giving his implied consent to the trial, a reluctant Cornelius had turned a lovely shade of green at reading her piece, but gave the go-ahead. Anything to bring Potter down a notch now that he claimed not one but 2 lordships. The next morning, she went to the editor's office and knocked. She handed in her article and left, humming to herself. Later that day, she got word from her contact in the ministry that he needed to speak with her. In Hogsmeade, in a corner table at the Hogshead, Rita met her contact, a fat little filing clerk in the DMLE that was disgruntled with how things were done. You need to run, Rita, the clerk said. The Potter's high-class barrister has filed paperwork for your arrest. Seems you've violated the terms of your employment.
He can't do that,
Rita hissed. Yes, he can. Potter owns controlling shares of the Daily Prophet, and he has requested that all articles about him go through his barrister before printing. How you got into a closed meeting at Gringotts is beyond me, but I'm sure the goblins would like to know as well. But I have the minister's backing, Rita argued. Old Fudge doesn't have any say. You violated your contract, Rita, and old Charlie is looking for ways to fire you. Best you lay low for a time. Heard Potter took off for the halls with that insane godfather of his, so he won't be around for you to snoop on. Rita shuddered as she paid her spy and left. This put a new wrinkle in her plans, she mused. The best way to hide would be in her bug form, but where? As a beetle, she knew that the whole world was against her, between the many predators that ate beetles to the many humans that don't watch where they are stepping. She smiled. There was one place she could hide and still get a scoop. Lord Charles sat in a very cluttered office, looking over at his friend. "Care for a drink while you are here, Peter?" "Don't mind if I do, Charles," smiled the barrister as he made himself comfortable. "She's a nasty bit of magic, isn't she? How in Merlin's name did she get on the papers? She blackmailed her way in originally, and then I couldn't get rid of her, as she had the ear, so to speak, of our illustrious minister." Charles coughed the innuendo into one hand as he handed Peter a shot of fire whiskey with the other. "Anyway, she had a binding contract, one I could not break." "I see," Lord Peter smirked, taking the glass with one hand while pulling out a folded piece of parchment with the other. "Thank you for alerting me about her. Here, this is what Lord Harry and I worked out on what should be published about his recent elevation to adulthood." Harry was coming in from the beach when Dobby popped in. "I see, sorry, Master Harry, sir. I see got an urgent letter for you from your Lord Petey. He says it's about what's his name. Old Dumley's trying to get hold of USC Master Harry, sir. Here is your copy of the Daily and Quibbly." Harry sighed and took the letter and package. "Thanks, Dobby." Harry James Potter Emancipated by Emmy Anderson. Yesterday, in a closed session at Gringotts, Harry James Potter met with Greta Marchbanks, head of the Wizarding Children's Services, and with Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Law Enforcement, standing instead of Minister Fudge to avoid a conflict of interest. Representing Mr. Potter was his barrister, Lord Peter Flinchley Adams, retainer at law. Also attending, but uninvited, was Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, protesting this action. The meeting lasted only an hour before Harry James Potter became emancipated. His title is now Lord Harry James Potter Gryffindor, Lord of the ancient and noble houses of Potter and Gryffindor. Lord Potter Gryffindor has issued a written statement that the emancipation came about due to the actions of Albus Dumbledore, headmaster of Hogwarts and head of the Wizengamot, and Cornelius Fudge, Minister of Magic. They declared Lord Potter Gryffindor an adult through their actions this past year. Lord Potter Gryffindor stated that by forcing him to participate in the Triwizard Tournament and by trying him as an adult before the Wizengamot, both bodies of government set a new precedent and thereby declared him an adult by default. What Lord Potter Gryffindor has planned for the future is unclear at this time. He wishes to finish his schooling in peace before making any further decisions. We, at the Daily Prophet, wishes him well. The Order of the Phoenix was in turmoil. No one could find Harry or Sirius anywhere. When asked, Remus shrugged and replied, "Sirius been planning on taking Harry away for Christmas after all. They left a note and were gone before I arrived." "But it isn't safe," Molly screeched, throwing up her hands. "Albus, how could you allow this to happen? You promised that Harry would be safe here at Hogwarts, or we would have demanded he come to the Burrow." Now, Molly," Albus said calmly. "I'm sure once I have a talk with the boy, he will only see that we have his best interest at heart." Remus snorted. "Pull the other one, Albus. Harry's a lot like his father in stubbornness, but he's also his mother's son and has her temper." Molly started to screech again until someone put a silencing spell on her. Arthur thought about removing it and chiding whoever performed it, but decided instead to be thankful for the small miracle of silence. In the deep recesses of the ministry, Croker was going over the file on the latest reports of Lord Harry James Potter. "So, the boy finally managed to get out from under old Albus' control," he chuckled as he read Sparkplug's report. "And Molly was heard in all her glory at Gringotts. So by morning everyone else will know as well. Boss, a letter from Twist has arrived. What does the lad have to say? Dear Unspeakables, I want to thank you for your help these past few months in supplying me with all the stats for my articles. I am wondering though, is the Queen really going to get involved with the wizarding world? I heard from the grapevine that Fudge is still in the dark looking for my head. I guess I shouldn't be surprised. He always did have his head up his arse. What I am surprised about is that no one has figured out who I really am. Even Rita, in her illegal animagus disguise, hasn't found me." "Oh, didn't know that, did you? How I found out?" I have my own sources. Potter has been very helpful in giving me detailed information as well. Seems no one really understands just how disgruntled our golden boy really is. He's been writing me notes since I first started my articles. As for your offer of joining, I think I'll pass for the moment. I refuse to go near the ministry while it is still headhunting my head, to be honest. Well, I have to go. I am enjoying my Christmas hauls tremendously. Oliver. Croaker laughed. How ingenious this lad really is. I wonder how long it'll take for the rest of my people to figure it out? In Little Hangleton, a scream of rage echoed off the stone walls as many dark cloaked figures stepped back in fear. Rita found the prefect place to hide, Potter's trunk which he left behind for the holiday. As she tried to wiggle her way into the trunk, eager to delve into the brat's secrets, a glass jar slammed down over her.
She was caught.
Buzzing her wings frantically, she tried desperately to escape, only to have a lid clapped firmly down, trapping her. As she peered out of the jar, she saw a distorted image of a house elf wearing what looked like a safari hat and khaki commando shirt and shorts. Bad buggy. Dobby caught USE. Master Harry sir will be so pleased. Maybe he'll let Dobby keep USE for a pet. 27. Holiday Madness. Black Island was an unplottable island near Port Royal. Its white sandy beach and clear blue waters were like a little bit of paradise. The only building on the island was a Victorian summer manor house with long verandas wrapping it. However, it was the beach of a nearby wizarding resort island that proved to be everything Sirius promised it would be. The older wizard had wished he had remembered to pack a camera. The day after they arrived on Black Island, Remus Portkeyden. To say the werewolf was furious at being left behind to be the scapegoat of the Order's rantings and interrogations would be putting it mildly. It couldn't be helped, Moony, Sirius said, snickering. We had to get out of there before Dumbledore's prison door closed on Harry again. The old man tends to forget that the boy needs some joy in his life. Remus started to protest more vehemently until Sirius stopped him by pointing down the beach. Look at Harry, and what do you see? The teen in question was busy building a castle in the sand, something he'd always dreamed of doing as a child. He was planning on being a carefree kid for the whole week. When was the last time you've seen him that relaxed and happy, if ever? Sirius asked. He knows he's safe here, Moony. Only I, as head of the Black family, can give access to this island. He can now finally be himself and be the kid he was never allowed to be. The two marauders soon settled in matching chairs as they watched Harry play in the sand and surf while they sipped drinks in the shade of the veranda. Moony. Sirius paused for a moment. Let me tell you what I found out in the meeting at Gringotts. You weren't there for most of it. Sirius stared out at the lowering sun as he spoke in great detail of what he'd learned. So you see, he finished, we failed them all, James, Lily, and Harry. I don't think they'll ever forgive us. For the remainder of the week, the three of them spent their time island hopping between Black Island and the nearby wizarding resort beach and nightclub. After all, according to Sirius, Harry needed to have his horizons broadened, so to speak. Both men were now convinced it was in Harry's best interest to have nothing to do with Dumbledore's order, as it wasn't what it had been when they first joined. During the First War, Albus had been far more open to the opinions of the members, and they had actively stood against Voldemort. Now it was a dictatorship, and most importantly, Albus was taking more interest in Harry's life than the war itself. Such interest was very unhealthy. The man had too many damn secrets and wasn't about to share them. Not good when people's lives might stand or fall on the knowledge he was hoarding. I should have never listened to Albus, Moony. He's cost me more than anyone could ever know, Sirius said sadly, one night as they had checked on a sleeping Harry. You trusted him. We all did, Remus said, joining him on the patio with a couple of drinks. I never visited Harry once, in all the time he was growing up, because Albus said it wasn't safe, and with my furry problem, Sirius sighed. We both failed them. We both promised to be there for Harry, and we weren't. We promised. And it's a wonder we still have our magic the way we let them down. We failed because we put our trust in the wrong person, Padfoot. He made sure we looked to him for everything. The Muggles would say he brainwashed us from the time we were kids, and looking back on it, they'd be right. We all trusted Albus blindly. What does Harry say about all this? Sirius gulped down his drink before replying. Harry wants us in his life, but he won't allow anyone, including us, to control him the way Albus has. Anymore, the decisions to be made are his alone to make. We had our chance, and we stuffed it. Remus watched his old friend as he brushed away a tear. All we can give him now is our love. Cornelius Fudge wadded up his copy of The Prophet and threw it at his aide, Percy Weasley, a.k.a. Weatherby, and snarled. Where's that blasted Skeeter woman? She was supposed to stop Potter from getting any political clout. Percy Weasley ducked.
I'm
sorry, sir, but she hasn't reported for work for 2 days. The DMLE has a warrant for her arrest for invasion of privacy, and she's wanted by the goblins for questioning. I would imagine she's laying low for the time being. Find her. Fudge snapped, slamming his fist on his desk. And contact Lucius. We need a plan for when Potter tries to claim his seats on the Wisengamot. Yes, sir. Percy hurried out the door before hesitating briefly and called over his shoulder, Don't forget you have a meeting with the Muggle Prime Minister at 1. Percy shut the door just as a spell slammed into it. Hermione returned home with mixed feelings. She had told her parents about the fallout between her and Harry and about her limited career choices in the wizarding world. To say they were unhappy with the situation was a gross misstatement. You mean to tell us that all you are good for in that world is to bear children? Her father demanded. We allowed you to go after we spoke with that professor. She told us that you would be a very promising witch with a bright career ahead of you. You could have gone to the finest schools in Britain for what we're paying. Hermione hung her head. There really wasn't anything she could say to that. She'd probably snuffed up all her chances at getting a placement in a good uni, since she hadn't taken any Muggle classes while attending Hogwarts. That night, as Hermione was settling into bed with a good book, her mother entered. Hermione, sweetie, we need to talk. What about Mum? Hermione asked, setting her book aside while cringing inwardly. She'd been dreading this discussion. About your letters, her mother started in as she sat at the foot of her daughter's bed. Something's changed, hasn't it? What do you mean, Mum? Hermione asked nervously. Oh, sweetie, your letters used to contain such tales about this boy, Harry, her mother explained. And now he's almost disappeared from them. In fact, your letters are all about your schoolwork with very little about your social life. Hermione huffed. What's social life? Only Harry and Ron spoke to me. The girls in my dorm barely tolerate me. Her mother sighed. Hermione, sweetie, do you remember we had this talk when you were in primary school? The one about if you want friends, you must first be a friend? Hermione sniped. That's the one. I was so happy that you made friends at Hogwarts. I was a bit concerned that they were boys, but still, what happened? Hermione sighed. Harry is upset that I didn't write to him over the summer. He's barely spoken to me all term. He's just shut me out. Did you promise to write to him? Yes, but it wasn't safe. I couldn't. So, you broke a promise to your friend? Is this the same one whose friend died? Yes, but Professor Dumbledore told us not to. He said it was for Harry's own good. Her mother sighed. Hermione, I know we taught you to respect adults, but we also taught you that adults are not always right. Respect is one thing, sweetie, blind trust is another. Taking a deep breath, her mother paused before continuing. Tell me, sweetie, if Harry'd promised to write to you after you lost a friend, would he keep that promise? No matter what someone else told him, would he find a way to be there for you in your grief? You made a promise and went back on it. Now it's cost you a very important friendship. Hermione hung her head in shame. How often had Harry broken the rules for her? She sniffled. But Mum. Professor. Her mother held up her hand. Hermione, you said in your letters that Harry was supposedly safest at his relative's house. However, you also said in your letters that you suspect Harry's living conditions with them weren't the greatest. In fact, a few of your letters hinted that he was abused by these same relatives. Am I correct? Hermione nodded sadly. You had a choice, whether to be there for a grieving friend or obey a professor who had no right to deny a student simple communication outside of school. You could have found a way to keep in touch with him. As far as the headmaster keeping information from the boy when it directly impacts his life, well, I'm not saying that your professor was right in keeping him in the dark. I only know what you told us, but even we can read between the lines, sweetie. Hermione sighed, looking at her hands. Harry had been trying to tell her all term that the headmaster wasn't always right, especially when it came to him. You are right, Mum, but it doesn't matter. You and are going to pull me out of Hogwarts, aren't you? Your father and I are still deciding if we will allow you to return to Hogwarts after the holidays. I suggest that you take some time to think about what you want to happen. Minerva was sitting at her desk going over the first term exams before heading over to her sister's home for the halls. She had this last bit of work to do. A knock on the door, and Poppy entered. Minerva, I have Albus test results. He wasn't happy about taking them. However, after I threatened to go to the board, he complied. As deputy headmistress, it is your right to have a copy. He wasn't happy that you and the board would be receiving copies, but still. Poppy huffed. I'll leave you to your reading. Sorry to spoil your holidays. I know you were looking forward to spending time away with your family. Minerva sighed as she reached for the file. Sirius and Remus walked into the manor house on Black Island after spending the day appreciating the many shapes and forms of the half-naked female bodies that littered the resort's beach. Harry had returned earlier as he had some mail from Lord Peter. The two old marauders could heard Harry's laughter ringing out. What's up, Harry? Sirius called with a lopsided grin. Harry cackled at the two while pointing and placing a hand on Dobby's shoulder. The house elf was holding up a lidded glass jar with a very strange-looking beetle in it. Dobby caught the bad buggy. The elf was dressed in his safari gear. Harry Potter, sir, is letting Dobby keep her as a pet, he said, holding the jar higher for them to see his prize. The bug was trying frantically to escape by scratching at the jar's lid. Dobby promises to take care of Buggy. I see feed her and love her and calls her Buggy. Dobby will. Harry lost it totally, dropping to the floor in hysterical laughter as the two men looked at each other in confusion. Trying between gasps of breath, Harry pointed at the jar and managed to get out It's Rita. 28. All good things must come to an end. It was 3 tired, sun-kissed males that port-keyed back to Grimmauld Place 2 days before the start of the school term. Harry smiled tiredly up at his 2 godfathers before heading towards his bedroom. We did good, Moony, Sirius said as he staggered towards his bed. The next day found Harry, Sirius, and Remus back at Gringotts. The meeting didn't take long. Harry simply had to go over some business with Lord Peter and Ragnarok. Sirius sat in and listened, but made no comment. He didn't try to run interference or influence Harry in his decisions. The older wizard had come to accept, during their vacation, that he made a better uncle than guardian. Bloody hell, even Remus made a better guardian than him. The ritual was scheduled to be performed at the dark of the moon, which was due in 5 nights. Harry had mixed feelings about doing the ritual itself. Of course, he wanted that connection with Riddle to be severed, and most of all, to be out from under everyone's control. It was the possible cost that was worrying him. Get a grip, Potter, he thought. You've already paid enough in sweat and blood. And it's a fine time to worry about that now. The day that all the students returned to Hogwarts, the Daily Prophet's headline once more brought chaos. Cornelius Fudge ousted as Minister of Magic by Amelia Anderson. In a vote of no confidence called for by the British Muggle Prime Minister, Cornelius Fudge was ousted today as Minister of Magic. Right after the vote, the former minister was arrested on several counts of fraud, embezzlement, and bribery, and on 6 counts of breaking existing treaties between the Wizengamot and Muggle Parliament. Amelia Bones was appointed acting minister until a new minister is elected. See page 2. The Muggle British Prime Minister to address the Wizengamot next month. Albus Dumbledore sat at his desk. A notice that he was to appear at the next school board meeting had him worried. He was surprised that the board hadn't been more demanding following Oliver Twist's articles. No one still had managed to find a clue on just who this person was. Several of the Muggle-born snickered over the name, but refused to comment on it. It seemed they found the ignorance of their pure-blood counterparts amusing. He was also concerned about Minerva. His deputy had been avoiding him for most of the Christmas halls. She was up to something, he just didn't know what. Well, He'd just have to plan for the worst and hope for the best for now. Harry sat in a compartment with Luna as the Hogwarts Express barreled its way back to the school. Ron was off somewhere, doing whatever it was that prefects do, and Harry had yet to see Hermione. He hadn't heard from her all holiday. Oh well, nothing new there. Ginny was also gone. It was rumored that she was going out with Dean. Harry was thankful he had managed to get onto the train without dealing with Mrs. Weasley. That woman was still trying to get custody of him and refused to accept the fact that Harry was now emancipated and could think for himself. "Hello, Harry," came the dreamy voice of Luna, breaking into his thoughts. "Did the Nargles give you a nice Christmas? I see that you have been busy playing with the water sprites." Harry laughed. "Daddy is waiting for another article, Harry. He's quite vexed that you took the halls off." Harry blinked, bolting straight up in his seat. Luna lowered her copy of the Quibbler that she had been reading upside down and looked at him. "When I asked Daddy when you would start writing again, he sputtered for a bit. Do you want Daddy and me to take an oath?" Harry sputtered and shook his head. "No, Luna. I trust you, but could you not mention it in front of people?" She smiled as the door opened. "Harry," Hermione exclaimed. "You just would not believe it." "Believe what, Hermione?" "I took my parents to Gringotts to do the inheritance test like Twist told us to. Guess what? You are a founder's heirs? The Wartspuddles made a nest your hair?" "What? No." Hermione sputtered as she hugged her friend. "I am related to Hector Dagworth Granger on my dad's side. He was the founder of the most extraordinary society of potioneers. Seems his brother was a squib. It was all hushed up. Even Dad didn't know about it. I've got a vault and everything." Harry smiled. "So this means you are a half-blood and not a Muggle-born, right?" Hermione gushed. "My parents agreed to allow me to continue with my schooling as long as I start taking Muggle tutorials during the summer. My new vault will pay for most of it." The first week back to Hogwarts flew by fast. Harry found himself under a lot of scrutiny, making it almost impossible to get away. He did arrange with Professor McGonagall to be out of the castle when it came time for the ritual. He mentioned that an emergency meeting between his advisors and Sirius was necessary. She never suspected a thing. Harry found himself once more within the bowels of Gringotts. The room he now stood was the same room he first met the keeper in. She was here again, seated on her raised chair. Harry walked forward, bowed and stood before her, waiting patiently. She smiled at him and nodded. "Greetings, lady. When you said the Slytherin magic would be mine to keep, to use, bequeath, deny, or undo, what exactly did you mean?" Harry queried with a puzzled frown. "I meant, child, that, if accepted by the Slytherin signet, you will be the master of Slytherin family magic. You will be the one to decide if the spells the Dark One has cast hold or fail. You will decide whether to recall the magic he stole from you. This would mean that any of his spells, like the one that seals the piece of his soul to you, would be undone. This would then free you of his taint, and any other beings, places, or items he has done the same to as well." "Any others?" Lord Peter asked in a shocked whisper. "Yes," her soft, sibilant voice answered. "I believe that the one who calls himself Voldemort has created more soul repositories. This is why his spirit was able to remain on this plane of existence even though the boy killed his body long ago." The wizards that stood in front of her shuddered at her words. "Then if I claim this ring and the magic of Slytherin and speak the ritual," Harry started to say. "Yes, child. You will put an end to his power, once and for all." "Let's do it then," Harry said, straightening his shoulders. The look of determination that schooled his youthful features was impressive. "There will be immense pain when the soul piece is released, and great danger when you call for judgment," she warned. "Can't be any worse than the Cruciatus, or the twice-be-damned visions, and if this will save lives it's worth the bloody price," Harry muttered, then blushed. "Forgive my tongue. Such words aren't meant to be spoken in front of a lady." The ancient figure before him smiled. "These are the words you need to speak, child. I, Lord Harry James Potter Gryffindor, do hereby claim, by right of conquest, the ring and magic of the ancient and noble house of Slytherin. Mine by right, to keep, to use, to bequeath, to deny, and to undo, as the magical head of the line. You must then claim the ring as you did those of Potter and Gryffindor. Place it upon your finger, and if it accepts you, continue. Harry nodded, and suiting action to her command, placed the ring on his finger and repeated her words. There was a brief glow as his claim was accepted. He then turned to the ancient female goblin and spoke the words she gave him. I, Harry James Potter, Lord of Potter, Gryffindor and Slytherin, do call upon the magics I wield as the head of these ancient and noble houses to disown, disavow, and call for the renunciation of Tom Marvolo Riddle, the Dark Lord known as Lord Voldemort. I accuse him, before the old magic, of line theft against the head of the house he wrongfully claims, and also the houses of Potter and Gryffindor. 3. He is wronged through the theft of my blood. Further, I call upon magic to strip him of any and all magics from these lines that were gained unlawfully when my blood was taken unwilling, and to undo all magics, be they spells, wards, or creations, made with the Potter, Slytherin, or Gryffindor magics, and to return them all to me, their rightful wielder. A swirling wall of magic was building around Harry and the Keeper. Within its depths gold, silver, and green combined, shimmering into an almost solid essence around them. Faintly through it the observers could see Harry's body trembling as he struggled to continue. Tom Marvolo Riddle, false claimant to the title of Lord Slytherin, Lord Voldemort, you are hereby disowned. You have no name. You are hereby renounced. You have no family, no kin right. You are stripped of all Potter, Gryffindor, and Slytherin magic by my word and will. Harry gasped, staggering as a wall of pain and magic slammed into him with a force that almost knocked him off his feet. Somewhere, within his mind, he could hear unearthly screams as magic was uprooted and ripped away. Taking a deep breath, he continued in a shaking voice, clutching the arm of the Keeper's chair desperately for support. As is my right, I call upon the old magic to stand judgment, and if my cause is just, I ask that all the Nameless One has created through the magics he once wielded be unmade. So mote it be. With his last words, Harry screamed as the scar on his forehead burst open. Blood and black ichor ran down his face as he crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Harry! Sirius and Lord Peter shouted, stepping toward the boy. No, leave him. Ragnarok caught their arms, holding them back. They watched as the Keeper of Wisdom rose from her seat and knelt beside Harry's unmoving form. She leaned over him, one hand reaching to brush the hair from his face in a gentle caress. He will be well soon, she murmured softly. He fought the pain well and is a true warrior. His cause was deemed just and magic answered his call. She looked up then, raking Ragnarok and the two wizards with her strange, white eyes. There are few who could call upon the judgment of the old magic and be answered, and fewer still who could pass its judgment and live to tell of it. Sirius' face turned pale. Will he live? He gasped. He will be fine. When his wound bleeds cleanly, he may be healed. If it is done properly, there will be no scar. The foul darkness that flows from the wound now is all that remains of the soul piece he carried. It is no more. She nodded at them and slipped regally out the door. Her guard formed up and closed ranks about her as they left. The sound of marching goblin feet faded away down the hall. In Little Hangleton, an unearthly scream of torturous pain erupted in the inky dark silence that surrounded an old, rundown manor house. Inside, a man, if you could call him a man, was writhing in agony on a throne-like chair. Several prominent members of the wizarding world stood by helplessly, unable to give any aid to their lord and master due to the sudden draining weakness of their own bodies. 29. Well, I'm back, miss me? The first Monday morning after the new year, Vernon Dursley felt like his heart would stop. The auditors had been busy for the last several weeks, and now the results were due. All management personnel were required to present themselves in the boardroom today to hear the auditors' findings. He'd seriously considered packing his clothing and leaving town Friday night, but a quick glance at their savings account balance had convinced him that was not a good option. He couldn't even blame the freak for this mess. The boy had himself emancipated. No, he was on his own. Damn the freak. How the hell did they figure it out? The scheme was foolproof, Parker said. Vernon fumbled for the keys to his new car, praying as he did, so that Parker was right. The office was eerily quiet as he entered. Sweat dampened his shirt despite the cold that blew in with him. Was it an omen? He shuddered and plastered a ghastly smile on his pasty face. Morning, Eliza.
Cold out there today.
He greeted the receptionist with false cheer as he strode quickly past her towards the boardroom beyond. Everybody here today? Yes, Mr. Dursley. They're waiting on you. He watched as her hand pressed a button on her intercom, and her head dipped as she spoke quietly into the machine. Finally. Take a seat, Dursley. Mr. Grunning, himself, sat at the head of the table. Vernon nodded briefly and took the only empty chair available, next to Parker. I shall begin then, said a thin, balding man as he stood and began his report. After a complete audit of all management personnel, my company has found only 2 major discrepancies. He paused to take a sip of water. Vernon became conscious of the squirming man next to him. Damn, Parker, sit still and stay cool. Your nerves will hang us yet. The majority of departments show some slight mishandling of funds, mostly due to clerical and mathematical errors. These have been pointed out and corrected. Those responsible have been taught the proper procedures to assure accuracy in the future. The auditor's droning voice seemed to go on forever. Vernon sat in a haze as sweat soaked his underarms and trickled down his back. Dear God, is this what it's like waiting for the axe to fall? He wondered as he fought for control of himself. Then, suddenly there was a deafening silence, and his heart stuttered as a grating order from Mr. Grunning startled him to awareness. Thank you. All of you except Dursley and Parker may return to work. The door shut quietly as the last person left. Tell me, Vernon, did you think you were underpaid? Did you, Parker? Couldn't the 2 of you wait for honest promotions? Or perhaps it was the thrill of it all. Vernon's hope died as the door opened again and 4 uniformed officers entered. Take them away. I cannot abide thieves. Oh, and I should probably warn you too, neither does the Office of Inland Revenue. Vernon only distantly felt the cuffs click home on his wrists. Everything was a blur as he was walked down the hall and out the front door by 2 of the officers. His mind never registered it as he was placed in the back of a cruiser and taken away. His life, his comfortable life, was over. Are you Mrs. Petunia Dursley? A uniformed officer asked her when she answered the insistent knocking on her front door. Yes, I am. Oh no. Has something happened to my dudders? She screeched in dismay. Why are you here? No, Mum. I have no idea who this Dudders is. I'm here about your husband, the officer started to explain, only to be interrupted again. A car crash? Heart attack, what? No, Mum. He's been arrested, the officer tried to explain once more. I'm here to collect all bank statements, savings account information, and all personal effects pertaining to his work and finances. Wah. His reply left her speechless. I have a magistrate's order to that effect, he continued, handing her an official-looking paper. I'd appreciate it if you'd step aside so I can finish this as quickly as possible. A numb and shaken Petunia stepped back to let him enter. Hermione watched as Harry left for his meeting at Gringotts. She was of 2 minds about Harry's new independence. On one hand, she was glad he didn't have to return to his dreadful relatives and was free to make his own decisions. On the other, she didn't feel comfortable about him shutting out the adults that cared about his safety and well-being. She just could not believe that Harry managed to keep this all a secret from her. Even Ron was pissed that Harry went around behind everyone's back and got emancipated without telling a soul, especially him. He felt he was still Harry's best mate despite their differences. Why keep it a secret? What was Harry trying to hide? She sighed as her mind drifted back to their conversation on the train after she'd told him about being related to someone in the wizarding world. Not a Muggleborn?
Wow.
That's strange. Harry replied to Hermione's enthusiastic news on the train. I wonder how many others found out similar news? He frowned and thought. I guess this means that you can get a better job than you thought, eh? Hermione looked at the boy she had called her best friend for almost 5 years. She recalled all the good times they had spent together. He was her best friend, and her blind faith in authority figures had led her to betray his trust. Her mother's words had been like a glass of ice water in the face. It was time she apologized. Harry?
I
want to tell you how sorry I am that I let the headmaster control me this past summer. She hung her head briefly, then raised her eyes to his. I was a fool and, even worse, I broke a promise to my best friend. I wasn't there for you when you needed me the most. Can you ever forgive me? Her eyes shone bright with the tears she was fighting. Hermione, I'm not, he stuttered. Her shaking hand on his arm stilled him. I know it will take time, and I know we may never be. She paused to swallow a sob. We may never be as close as we were. But do you think maybe we could try to start again, please? Because I miss you, Harry. Without you, I'm alone, and I don't want to be alone anymore. She crumpled against his shoulder as the tears fell. Harry reached out and circled her shoulders with one arm. I don't know if I can trust you like before, Hermione. It hurts so much when you left me lost and alone for the whole summer. I needed you, and I don't ever want to feel like that again. Her muffled sobs shook both of them. I promise, Harry. I swear I'll never hurt you like that again. I'll even take a witch's oath on my magic. She managed to choke out. No, Hermione, don't you see? If I asked for your oath, it would mean that I couldn't trust you. We'll just have to see if what's broken can be mended, or else we'll have to try to start again. Harry pulled out a clean hanky and offered it to her. His kind smile drew a watery one from her as she mopped her face. Hello, my name is Harry Potter. What's yours? As the memory ended, she wondered when Harry would be back and if he was ever going to tell her about his business at Gringotts. Albus Dumbledore was having his own problems. A school board meeting had been called, and he wasn't invited. He had hopes to spend the first week of the new term trying to convince Harry to give up his emancipation and allow him to continue to guide him. The board was meeting even now on something they simply told him was a matter of utmost importance. Just what had been in that report that Poppy submitted. He felt fine, never better. If it had anything to do with his checkup, it just had to be a mistake. That's right, a mistake. We bring this meeting to order. The harsh sound of a gavel striking stone silenced the board members. A matter of grave concern has been brought to our attention by the Mediwitch and Deputy Headmistress of Hogwarts. Mutters and whispers broke out once more, and once more the gavel silenced them. It would seem that the Deputy Headmistress has noticed some rather disturbing behavior on the part of Headmaster Dumbledore of late. Her report describes an obsessive interest in one particular student. Obsessive to the point that he has put the rest of the students in danger to guarantee the safety of said student. He has also taken it upon himself to try and control all of this student's actions, both at school and at home. We always suspected he was barmy. Too damn many lemon drops. Get to the gist of it, Malfoy. Very well. It is with the strongest recommendation of Madame Pomfrey, Mediwitch of Hogwarts, that the headmaster be remanded to St. Mungo's for a full medical and mental examination. She has tentatively suggested he may be suffering from a long-term and untreated condition similar to battle fatigue, and may be suffering from delusions. In her own words, the headmaster has been living on a full alert, battle-ready status for the last 35 years, and it has taken its toll on his mind and body, and she goes on to further request that we make this examination mandatory, as he will not voluntarily accept it. There was a satisfied glint in Lucius Malfoy's eyes as he finished quoting from the file in his hand. Well, I for one think we should bow to her request. Can't endanger our children. I vote we do as the Mediwitch suggests. All in favor. A chorus of ayes was heard. All well and good. Now how do we get him there for this checkup? Augusta Longbottom sniped. Harry sighed as he put down his copy of the Quibbler. Let the interrogations begin. Well, I'm back. Miss me? To recap one of my earlier articles, I made a trip into Gringotts over the holidays. The goblins are now considering me an asset, as I made much profit for them. Close to 1,000 Muggleborns within the British Isles have taken the heritage test, and all have passed with interesting results. Many of them have claimed, by right of blood, idol vaults that had been frozen for years, if not centuries, waiting to be reclaimed. The goblins are happy that this idle wealth that had been laying around collecting dust is once more being put back into circulation and earning the customer and the bank interest again. Speaking of Muggleborns, I have to say that some of the more archaic pureblood beliefs are now a bit useless. Don't get me wrong, as I said in the past, the government is run on the closed circuit, you do for me and I'll help you system, all tied into pure blood status and family alliances. Now that some of these Muggleborns can trace their bloodlines back to many of the ancient and noble houses, things should prove interesting. I caught the British Prime Minister's speech in front of the Wisengamot the other day. I must say I was impressed. Red and purple look horrid on some people, especially those that are called on the carpet, as the Muggles like to say. Who knew our leading wizards could turn so many colors? It took real courage and a sharp tongue for the PM to stand before armed wizards and call the leaders of the wizarding world unruly children who could not play well together. I, for one, was very thankful to hear that spellcasting was not only illegal within the Great Meeting Hall, but also downright dangerous. At least the Prime Minister was able to speak for Her Royal Majesty without being hexed to death by irate representatives. Lastly, I had a chance to communication with Lord Harry Potter. He contacted me through Gringotts. He has been kind enough to answer a few questions I had for him and generously gave me permission to print the answers so long as I quoted him verbatim. LP, I really liked your articles, Mr. Twist. They're spot on and from the checking I've done are brilliant. It's about time somebody stood up against the injustice that runs crazy throughout the wizarding world. I say good on you, mate, and hope you continue to write the truth. Merlin knows someone has to. OT, was it true that you defeated Lord V as an infant? LP, I will only say that there is always a bit of truth to every myth. The problem is finding that bit of truth. I'm told that I'm the boy who lived. Odd, isn't it? Few ever ask me how I did it. All they have ever asked was to see the scar. I don't know, I was a baby when it happened. Yet everybody thought I killed V. I think it was my parents who died protecting me that made it possible for me to live. Does anyone but me think about my parents' sacrifice? No. All they ever see is this ruddy scar. OT. It is rumored that because you are a parcel mouth, you are going dark. Is it true? LP. If being ridiculed one moment, praised the next, and growing up in the Muggle world doesn't make me dark, then I doubt being a parcel mouth will. I'm just trying to find my place in a world that threw me away and now wants me to be their savior. Fat chance. OT. What do you see in your future? LP. As of right now, I'm not sure my place is here, in the wizarding world. I've never felt that it is my home. I'm dragged out to perform my duties, fight your battles, and when I'm done, you return me to the Muggle world like a kid's broken toy. So don't blame me for the state of the wizarding world. I didn't do it. You did long before I was born. Clean up your own mess. OT. Thank you, Lord Potter. My brief interview with Lord Potter leaves many unanswered questions. One thing that did come up, Lord Potter has claimed his inheritances and his Wisengamot seats. Perhaps this indicates his willingness to give the wizarding world a chance. We hope so. Oliver Twist. 30, on your mark. The meeting of the board ended immediately after their vote. Augusta Longbottom looked on in puzzlement as a weary-looking Lucius Malfoy hurriedly portkeyed out. She'd thought he would have taken the time to rub their noses in his triumph over Dumbledore's removal as headmaster. He'd been trying to accomplish it for years now. How odd, she mused. How that man bought his way back onto the board is beyond me. Augusta mentally went over the meeting. Now that she thought of it, Malfoy had seemed rather drawn and lackluster, far from his normally abrasive personality. Strange indeed, perhaps this would bear looking into. A drained and weak Lucius Malfoy collapsed in the entry to Malfoy Manor. Shocked house elves quickly gathered their down master and levitated him off to his bed. They then informed the mistress of the house, who quickly summoned the family healer. A note was also sent to Severus Snape, requesting his expertise immediately. It would receive no reply. Well, what is wrong with him? Narcissa demanded when the examination was done. I'm sorry, Lady Malfoy, the healer said, straightening his robes as he put away his wand. The only cause for his extreme weakness is a slow and steady drain on his magic. I'm afraid that he'll become less than a squib in a matter of hours. We can only hope that his heart is strong enough to handle the loss of his magic.
What?
You can't be serious. My husband is a powerful wizard. What could possibly do this to him? She screeched. I can only tell you that he is the fourth person I have seen in the last day suffering from the same malady. The fact that he still has a magical core at all is a testament to his strength. Not and Avery weren't so lucky. They are both muggles now, and may still die from the draining. Those in attendance to the master when he collapsed weren't so fortunate. They are now dead. He hesitated, then turned to face her directly. It seems to be centered on his dark mark, Lady Malfoy. Since you are not affected, I assume you, like myself, have no mark? She shook her head in reply. No, it was decided that my appearance in society was more important. The Dark Lord exempted me from bearing it. Draco isn't scheduled to take the mark until next summer. Narcissus staggered to a nearby chair and dropped into it. Merlin's ghost. What are we to do now? How is the Dark Lord? Any idea on what caused his collapse? Not at this time. He hasn't regained consciousness. His last words were of the Potter menace. Severus Snape sat wearily in his oversized armchair, rubbing his left arm, clutching a crumpled note. He could feel the dark mark on his left arm throbbing with his pulse. This was it. Could Potter have managed to do something fatal to the Dark Lord? It had to be. It was the only explanation. Severus? He glanced over at the fireplace. Yes, Minerva, he asked, standing. May I come through? After he gave his permission, he slumped tiredly back into his chair. Forgive me, acting headmistress, but I am a bit indisposed tonight. Indisposed, Severus? The Dark Lord is showing his displeasure for some reason. I am not sure why he is doing so, but I find myself incapable of answering his summons. Why are you here, Minerva? Minerva sighed as she sat across from him. Oh, Severus. With Albus confined to St. Mungo's for who knows how long, I have been forced to suspend classes for a week until things are more settled. It's just as well, Severus said, holding up a bottle of Ogden's Best. Care for a dram? Severus? Are you all right? You look terrible. Perhaps a dram isn't a good idea at this point. Well, it certainly can't hurt. He snorted in disgust. To be truthful, it feels like I'm dying, Minerva. Like every last bit of energy is being sucked out of me. The headmistress' gasp of shock echoed in the room. I'd best get Poppy.
No.
If it's what I think, no one can help me. Gathering what strength left to him, Severus continued. I think he's dying, Minerva. He's trying to keep himself alive by sucking the magic out of his followers. I always feared it might come to this. A knock sounded at the door. Minerva rose shakily to answer it. Mr. Potter? I'm afraid Professor Snape is unable to see you right now. Her quavering voice shocked Harry. What's wrong, Professor? Is he hurt?
What? Not now, Mr. Pot.
She was stunned when the boy in question brushed past her and hurried to the side of his weakening professor. Severus looked up at the bane of his existence and sucked in a gasp. The boy looked terrible and yet at the same time powerful. I just got back from the goblins. The ritual worked, the brat was explaining. They really wanted to keep me for a couple of days, but something told me to return here. Then Potter plopped onto the sofa next to Minerva. Of all the gall. Ritual? What are you going on about, Potter? Severus snarled. He wasn't about to spend the last moments of his life catering to this whelp. Potter sighed, running a hand through his already messy hair. The goblins offered, for a price, a ritual to get rid of the Horcrux that old Tommy boy placed in my scar, and to take care of any others he might have made as well. So, once I claimed the Slytherin headship by right of conquest, the Keeper, along with my advisors, informed me that I needed to cast Riddle from the family and strip him of all Potter, Gryffindor, and Slytherin family magics. He did, after all, use my blood in that disgusting ritual my 4th year. Both adults straightened in their seats, eyes widening in stunned awareness. So I did. And now, old Tommy boy is finding it hard to keep his patchwork body together, Harry said with a shrug. He's relying on the connections to his followers, sucking away their magic to keep himself alive. They'll either become squibs, or die when their hearts give out. Severus sucked in a breath, clutching his left arm. So this was it. He'd be sucked as dry of his magic as a vampire drains its victim. The last moments of his life, and he had to listen to this brat's prattle. "Professor?" Potter asked, leaning forward to watch the older man closer. Severus could see the magic rippling around the boy. "Why does Dumbledore trust you so much? Why have you always protected me while I attended Hogwarts, and why haven't you asked me if I could remove your dark mark?" Severus scowled. How dare he? The snifter shattered in his hand as his anger powered his waning magic. "Get out." "Now, Severus." Minerva started. The boy stood, hands on his hips. His green eyes, Lily's eyes, glaring down at him. For a moment, a brief moment, Severus saw Lily standing in front of him ready to give him one of her famous tongue lashings. "Look, sir, I can help you, but I need answers to those questions first. You just have to trust me. I might say the same to you, Potters." Harry sighed, running a hand through his hair.
"Fine.
"Be that way." He turned to go, throwing up his hands in frustration. "Try to help the man for my mother's sake, and what do I get?" "Well, I tried." "Potter, what are you babbling about?" Harry stopped at the door, placing a hand on the handle. "Answer my questions, sir, and I'll tell you." "Very Slytherin of you, Potters." "Yeah, well, I am now the head of family for the Slytherin line, sir." "Severus, you should tell him," Minerva interjected. Severus bowed his head. His greasy hair curtained his expression. "I was the one that told the Dark Lord about the prophecy. I had no idea that he would target Lily for it. I went to Albus after. I just wanted to make amends for what I had done. He offered to shield me, protect me if I gave him an unbreakable vow to serve as his spy. Afterwards, I went to Lily's grave and vowed to protect her son as best I could. Because of so many factors, I couldn't openly be seen to help you, Potter. Of course, you didn't make matters easier by prancing around Hogwarts as if you owned the place." "Well, sir," Potter said quietly, "I do sort of own the place now." Minerva huffed, which the pair ignored. "As for the mark, why should I ask you?" He lifted his tired eyes up to the boy. "If Albus couldn't remove it, what makes you think you can?" "Well, maybe. He's not a Parselmouth like I am?" Harry asked as he returned to the room. Severus gazed into the boy's intense green eyes as an unfamiliar feeling started well up in him. A feeling he had smothered, never allowed himself. Hope. Potter knelt in front of him, holding out a hand. "I can remove the mark and stop the draining, because as I said, sir, I am a Parselmouth. More importantly, I now control the Slytherin magic that Riddle used to bind you." Severus stared into those glowing, green eyes, wishing they were Lily's eyes. He didn't see Lily in those eyes now. The power, the compassion, and determination were all Harry, nor did he see James Potter. For the first time since the boy had come to Hogwarts, he was seeing Harry, just Harry. Between one feeble heartbeat and the next, Severus slowly took in what he was feeling, and with the last of his fading physical strength, he lifted his arm. Tremors racked his muscles as he slowly offered his trust to Harry. "Thank you, Professor," Harry said as he pushed up the man's sleeve to expose the ugly, inflamed brand. Severus watched in horror as the boy hissed and poured magic into his arm. Agony. Sharp and burning. He fought the urge to cry out. Darkness threatened to engulf him. No.
He refused to go out like this.
He would be damned if he would allow the Dark Lord to win this one. "Here, Severus, drink this," came Poppy's voice as the darkness receded. Poppy was bending over him, pressing a vial to his lips as he came to in the infirmary. "That one was a strengthening potion, and this is a pain potion." "How is he, Poppy?" came Minerva's voice from the far side of the bed. "He'll be fine after some rest," Poppy said. "Honestly, he should have been brought to me when you first found him. Why in Merlin's name you allowed Mr. Potter to remove that disgusting tattoo without me present is beyond me." "Now, Poppies." "Don't poppy me, Minerva McGonagall," the Medowitch huffed. "First Albus, now Severus and Mr. Potter. What do you think you were playing at?" "Did someone mention me?" came a tired voice from the next bed. "You should be asleep, Mr. Potter." The idea of doing a dangerous goblin ritual and then performing complex magic so soon after. It's a wonder you can still move. Severus started to chuckle. For the first time since he had taken the mark, he felt free. Raising his arm, he noted a light gauze wrapped around where the mark should have been and rubbed a finger over the bandage. A prickly feeling shot up to his shoulder. Gone was the ever-present throbbing that radiated from the mark. Was he totally free? But, came Potter's voice. "Sleep, young man, and I mean it," came Poppy's voice. "All right, you win, but I have to tell the professor something. Make it quick." Severus turned his head towards the boy. "What is it, Potter?" "Sir, not only was I able to remove the mark and snap its connection to your magic, I found a lot of other spells and stuff attached. Some of it had riddles magic around it, but some I didn't recognize. Most of them were compulsion and loyalty spells. At least that's what they felt like. I was able to get rid of most of them, but you might want to check with the goblins. For a fee, they'll take care of what I missed." Severus took in a breath. Albus. It had to be. "Th. Thank you, Mr. Potter. I'll take it under advisement." 31. Life can be funny. Harry walked into the Great Hall for dinner. It had been a week since the goblin ritual and the removal of Snape's dark mark. Today was the first time he'd been allowed to step foot outside the infirmary, and it was a studied opinion that Madame Pomfrey should be declared a dark witch for the obvious pleasure she took in locking down her helpless patients. She'd steadfastly refused to allow either Harry or Professor Snape out of her infirmary. No matter how determinedly both had sulked, threatened, and whined, she refused to comply. Poppy had a streak of pure evil, Harry was sure of it. Harry's mental grumbling halted as soon as he walked into the Great Hall. There his eyes, not to mention his ears, met with the strangest sight he had ever seen. Draco Malfoy and Hermione Granger were faced off in the center aisle, toe-to-toe in a shouting match, and the professors were sitting back, seemingly enjoying the show. Strange, shouldn't someone be putting a stop to this? Furthermore, just because the purebloods have always had a monopoly on all high-ranking, prestigious positions doesn't mean, screeched Granger, her face red. "It's tradition, Granger," Malfoy snarled, interrupting. "But then, what would you know about our traditions and culture? You are, after all, an outsider. It is our world." "Your world?" "I think Her Majesty might disagree. And as for tradition, shall we talk about traditions?" Hermione arched an eyebrow smugly. "You value traditions so highly, yet almost all pureblood families take any squib born to them and cast it out. They deny their own children a family and a name, all in the name of tradition and purity of blood. Leave it to you to focus on something so ridiculous. Squib children have no place in our world." Malfoy was stopped abruptly when Hermione broke in once more. "I was told that purebloods value family above all, and yet when a newborn fails to prove magical, it is cast out and forgotten. A practice, I might mention, which is still in effect among only the most primitive Muggle tribes when the child is female or not perfect. It is not, however, a custom practiced by civilized societies." Draco Malfoy shrugged. "This is tradition. It's worked for more than 1,000 years. Who are you, an outsider, to question it? I am the daughter of a squib. As such, I feel it is my right to question." She huffed, then continued. "Has it never occurred to you that the blood a squib carries is the same as that in the veins of its parents and their other magical children? Why blame a child for lack of magic when it was obviously the parents' own imperfect blood that created it? That they are at fault for producing a child with no magic, not the child. Perhaps it is they who should be condemned and barred from reproducing again, to keep their obviously flawed bloodline from spreading." Hermione's words fell into silence as the students and teachers sat stunned by her logic. Malfoy stood before her, mouth open in shock. "It looks to me that the pureblood tradition of getting rid of squib children is simply a way for them to hide their flawed and weakening bloodlines." She waited a moment for any rebuttal, then continued. "And just so you know, a squib in a magical family is no different than a magical child popping up in a Muggle family, two sides of the same coin." And what if Oliver Twist is right? We need the infusions of new blood from Muggleborns and half-bloods to keep magic strong and alive. With a stubborn tilt of his jaw, Malfoy finally spoke. Well, he can't be right. We would have seen the effect before now. Hermione snarled. Perhaps we already have. Of the 3 most powerful wizards in the world, 2 of them are half-bloods and only 1 a pureblood. Had anyone looked at the head table, they would have seen Filius Flitwick and Severus Snape struggling to contain their mirth. Unaware of her professor's reactions, Hermione blithely ranted on. So then, your answer to all of this is to just bury your head in the sand, maintain the status quo, and ignore the problem, hoping it'll go away? Is that what you are telling me? Because if it is, then you might as well dig that hole longer and deeper and save us the trouble of burying you when the time comes. Harry moved to sit with Neville and his friends. Now he understood why the teachers hadn't interfered. They were using this argument to prove a point. He wondered if the professors really understood that point. He glanced over at the Ravenclaw table. Many were listening and taking notes. No, they weren't about to join in. They might miss some important fact. Harry noted that the twins were quietly conducting business as usual, taking bets and urging their housemates to join the pool. They weren't having much luck, though, since the odds-on favorite was Hermione. And don't forget our career discussion with our head of house. Professor McGonagall lied to all Muggleborns when she extolled the virtues of working and living in the wizarding world, Hermione stated. I can't believe that a witch of her caliber would so mislead her students unless she was under direct orders to do so. That is not the Gryffindor way. A stunned gasp rippled through the hall as Hermione turned and strode proudly back to the Gryffindor table and her friends waiting there. With a wide grin, Harry stood and applauded his friend's logic. The rest of the hall, save Slytherin, soon followed. Minvera McGonagall was too shocked at the turn of the debate to sputter a denial. Croaker sighed as he put down the report he had been reading. The rumors were rumors no longer. The Dark Lord known as Lord Voldemort was no more. The reports were very vague at the cause of death as no body had been found, only a rotted hand, a desiccated rib bone, and a bloody robe. He recalled Potter reporting after the last trial of the Triwizard Tournament that his blood, along with other things, had been used in a foul ritual that brought Riddle back to life. If he remembered correctly, the boy mentioned these elements were used. Croaker picked up a list of names. We are looking at the death of our world if something isn't done, and soon, he thought. The list contained all of the Death Eaters that were now either dead or squibs. Names from many of the most prominent pureblood families were listed. Some families had more than one member on the list. As it now stood, a large number of the old, pureblood families were without their paterfamilias. Many also lost their mothers, heirs, and other siblings. Voldemort's death had crippled the British wizarding world's aristocracy. I can just see the Wisengamot enacting new marriage laws which will prove disastrous if. It isn't easy, Luna. I really don't have plans to reveal Oliver's true identity. I know several people have figured it out, but they haven't said anything. Are you going? Luna gave him a dreamy smile. Why should I? Who would believe me? Harry laughed and hugged his strange friend. Thanks, Luna. I have plans for Oliver, and seriously, I need him to be kept a secret from most of the wizarding world. Those that have figured it out are those that see the real Harry, and not the boy who lived. The Nargles seem to agree with you, Harry. I'll keep your secrets as well. Thanks, Luna. Inside the Great Hall, Harry picked up a copy of the Quibbler and read the newest twist article. Life can be funny. You know, life has a way of throwing you for a loop, sometimes 2 or 3. Take, for example, the heated argument between Hermione Granger and Draco Malfoy during dinner last week. One would think that the professors would be breaking it up as soon as it started. However, in a move very much like our former headmaster, who I am told is on stress leave until further notice, the shouting match was allowed to continue as no hexes were thrown. I firmly believe had there been, the professors would have stepped in. Although, Miss Granger did bring up one point that does remain worth repeating. Professor McGonagall lied to us Muggleborn when she extolled the virtues of working and living in the wizarding world, Hermione Granger stated. I can't believe that a witch of her caliber would so mislead her students unless she was under direct orders to do so. That is not the Gryffindor way. Doesn't the wizarding world have a backbone yet? On another note, I am hearing rumblings from the Wisengamot about new and upcoming marriage laws to help with the shortages caused the War of Pure Bloodlines. Excuse me? Didn't we just go through this when Her Majesty came for a visit? The directive she has issued to everyone was to bring the wizarding laws back to British standards set by Parliament. She will no longer tolerate any wizarding laws that discriminate against any race of sentient beings, or those which violate the laws of the realm. So, mandatory marriage laws would be considered illegal and a form of marital slavery and would add another nail in the coffin of the Wisengamot. Wouldn't it be better to offer incentives, such as tax relief for families who have more than one child? How about sponsorships/scholarships to Hogwarts for families with more than 2 children in attendance? What if squib children were kept and encouraged to marry within the wizarding world? After all, they do come from proven bloodlines. Why pass such asinine laws that force people to go against their own free will when the best way is to offer rewards if they comply to the needs of the whole? This makes more sense to me, but then the wizarding world as a whole just refuses to think for themselves. They would seem to rather allow a few to make decisions for them than complain about it when things don't go the way they should. Thankfully, I'm still in Hogwarts getting my education. As for the betting pool that the Weasley twins are still running, well, I am still enjoying everyone's thoughts on who they think I am. I rather like being in the background, always watching, always pointing out the missteps. Those who have figured it out, please keep my secrets as I am keeping yours. Your silence will allow me to continue to be a voice of reason in an insane world. Oliver Twist. Finest. They pass. With the eye of the crown already assessing our world, we stand to lose everything. Her Majesty will not be pleased if this happens. Croaker thought for a moment before penning a quick note. He started to chuckle. Well, if they do, I can just see it now. Twist will have new fodder for his poison pen. Speaking of Oliver Twist, Croaker picked up another note. Dear Unspeakables, I wish to inform you, as I know I can trust you to keep this quiet. Potter has come into his inheritances and claimed his rings. I saw them as he entered the Great Hall. He was even wearing the Slytherin ring. No one was allowed to enter the infirmary the week he and Professor Snape were confined by the Dragon Lady for reasons unknown. It did, however, coincide with the strange happenings with the Death Eaters. I must say Professor Snape is looking better and still has his magic, which makes me wonder how he was missed in the purge. Look for my next article in the Prophet.
OT.
Croaker's eyebrows shot up. Potter Gryffindor and Slytherin? Oh, Merlin! In the Great Hall, Minerva McGonagall huffed indignantly over her best fifth-year student's comments. Phileas stopped her with a calming hand on her arm. Don't, Minerva.
She's right.
You know as well as I that Albus didn't want us to tell the truth. He had his own agenda, and truth wasn't part of it.
But
Phileas shook his head. She was only saying what everyone is thinking. You know as well as I do that we are losing the best and brightest half-bloods and the Muggleborns every year due to the injustice of the Ministry policies. I did not wish to discourage any students striving to achieve. And you well know I had no choice. I had to follow Albus' dictates on these matters. Phileas shook his head. This has been building for years, if not decades.
no.
What we need to do is allow this to continue. He held up his hand to stall her protest. Let me finish. We need to allow this in a controlled environment. My little ravens have been debating these issues since Mr. Twist's articles began. I think it's time that we open this school wide. Let's do a round-robin debate with teams, rules, and judges. Don't you think it's time to return to teaching our students to use their minds to think, rather than to simply repeat empty words and phrases? Severus Snape stood. I agree, Minerva. You know Albus didn't like the students questioning him or what he saw as proper. He thought his way was the only way for the greater good. Minerva closed her eyes and thought. Very well then. I will let you and Phileas oversee this. Harry crowed in delight. A school-wide debate. He read the list of topics. Pureblood versus Muggleborn magic. Is there a difference? Birth rate within the wizarding world. Why is it declining? Squibs. Have their birth rates increased over the last century, and can they be integrated into wizarding society? Careers within the British wizarding world versus other countries. which offers career advancement for all. Oliver Twist. How accurate are the facts he stated? Harry, are you going to sign up for any of these debates? Hermione asked excitedly. No, I don't have time, Hermione, Harry said, turning to his friend. What one are you going to sign up for? One? All of them. Harry's eyebrow disappeared within his fringe. Do you think that's wise? I know you, Hermione. You should only pick one or two. You'll drop with exhaustion researching all of the topics, and don't forget you still need to study for our OWLS. Hermione huffed. I can do this. Most of them overlap anyway. Harry shook his head. I still think you should pick only a couple and sit in on the rest. But it's your funeral. On Monday morning, Harry walked down to the Great Hall for breakfast. His thoughts were on the debate held yesterday. The professors had decided to set aside Sundays for debates. The first one between Ravenclaw and Slytherin had been interesting to listen to. As it was the first, there had not been time for much research to be done. It lasted for 2 hours, until Professor Flitwick had called it a draw. Hermione had ignored his advice as usual and tried to get on many of the teams only to be rebuffed. She did manage to get on 2, and both were made up with Gryffindors. Her first debate was coming up next week. Harry turned around to see Luna standing in a small alcove. Nice article in the Quibbler today. When are you going to tell anyone? Sure. Not here, Harry said, nervously looking around, before grabbing and pulling her further into the alcove. A quick silencing charm, and Harry looked at his friend with a sigh. Thank you for joining us on this magical journey with Grimoire Audiobooks. We've reached the end of Harry Potter and the Poison Pen by the brilliant GenkaiFan. This tale of mystery, courage, and friendship has been an unforgettable adventure, reminding us of the enduring power of truth, love, and perseverance. If you've enjoyed this enchanting story, don't forget to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. Remember, with 50 likes and 50 comments, the next magical journey will soon follow. Stay connected. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you're the first to know about our upcoming audiobooks. Your support helps us bring these extraordinary stories to life and keeps the magic flowing. Until next time, thank you for being a part of the Grimoire Audiobooks family. Stay tuned for more spellbinding adventures, and as always, keep the magic alive.